Chapter 1 The Mad King Falls. The great bell of the Sept of Baelor rang through the stone and smoke of King's Landing, shattering the morning stillness like a blade of sound. Its deep, sonorous voice rolled across the city's crooked streets and steep alleys, bouncing from the red roofs of Flea Bottom to the towering bastions of the Red Keep above. It was a sound few ever heard, one reserved for moments of utmost significance. And this morning, no one had been expecting it. The first to notice were the dockworkers, unloading barrels of olive oil and Dornish wine near the wharf. Salt still in their beards and sweat on their brows, they turned toward the sound as the bell echoed again. Gong, 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 3 tolls, ain't market day, one muttered, wiping his forehead with the edge of his tunic. And I heard no rumors of a wedding. Nor a death, said another, voice low, glancing toward the rising heights of the Red Keep. Unless it be one they kept hush. In the streets of Flea Bottom, beggars stirred from their doorways in half-collapsed hovels, blinking against the light and staring up at the gleaming white dome of the Sept. Pigs squealed in muddy puddles, and dogs began to bark at the sky. A child clutching a half-eaten crust paused mid-bite, wide-eyed. "Does the bell mean a war, Ma?" asked a little girl with a tangle of blonde curls. Her mother, stirring ashes from last night's fire, didn't answer at once. Her eyes were on the Red Keep's towers, her brow furrowed. "Could be a birth," she said slowly. "Or a death." Gong, gong. The bell rang again, high above the city, within the marbled halls of the great Sept of Baelor. The bell continued its tolling under the supervision of red-robed septons. They said no word, even as the bell rope creaked in their hands. This was no accident. The order had come from the Red Keep itself, sealed, signed, and delivered by a white cloak sworn to the king. In the Street of Sisters, noblemen in embroidered cloaks stepped out of their carriages, staring in confusion at the sky. House banners fluttered faintly in the morning breeze, but the streets had gone oddly quiet. The blacksmiths had paused their hammering. The bakers let their loaves burn. In whispered corners of taverns and temples, the questions began to stir. Did the queen pass in childbirth? Is the king dead? No, he was all right yesterday. Then who, and why the bell? It did not take long. By the time the 6th toll of the great bell echoed off the walls of the dragon pit, the whisper had already taken root in the streets like wildfire catching in dry hay. It passed from lips to ears, from inns to markets, from gold-cloaked guards to hollow-eyed merchants and fishwives stirring their pots. The Mad King is dead. There was no royal herald, no official decree read from scroll or parchment. The gold cloaks moved swiftly through the winding streets, doing their duty with dull faces and forced gravitas. They cried the news aloud as they had been told, a careful script approved by someone high in the Tower of the Hand. King Aerys, second of his name, may the 7 guide his soul, has passed in the night, bellowed a gold cloak near the Iron Market, his voice flat. His death is a tragedy to all of Westeros. We honor the memory of his grace. A few people made signs of the 7. A few dropped their heads. A few even wept, though whether from relief or joy was hard to tell. The truth was, behind shuttered windows and inside crumbling hovels, the small folk of King's Landing were smiling. Because everyone knew. They knew what Aerys had become. They had seen the smoke rise from Maegor's Holdfast, the black column that curled into the sky whenever his rage took hold. They had heard the screams, men and women dragged to his pyromancers for whispered crimes. They had seen the red robes come down the street and known to hide their children. In just 2 nights past, the smell of burnt flesh had clung to the stones near the stables behind the Red Keep. "A stable boy," said a merchant to his wife as they prepared their stall for the day. "Burned alive. Just a boy, maybe 10. Said he tried to poison the king's food." "Did he?" "No. Boy never set foot in the kitchens. Was afraid of fire." "Irony, that." The woman spat into the dirt. "Mad. Always was. His death is the first good thing the gods have done this year." From the Street of Flower to the Hook, from the brothels of Chatias to the high-born halls of Visenia's Hill, the people of King's Landing remembered. They remembered the laughter that came from the throne room when the king watched men burned. They remembered his long, silver nails and the way his eyes darted like a cornered rat's. They remembered the scent of wildfire creeping through the city's sewers like a snake beneath the stones. They remembered, and they did not mourn. In hushed tones and safe shadows, they whispered other things. Perhaps the prince will be better. Perhaps the madness ends with him. Perhaps the dragons are truly dead now. And beneath the murmur of prayers and false lamentations, a strange thing began to happen. The air felt lighter. The wind seemed cleaner. The stones beneath their feet felt, just slightly, less cursed. The Mad King was dead, and for the first time in a generation, the city dared to hope. The news of King Aerys's death had reached the small folk like a holy gift, but within the red walls of the Maegor's holdfast, there was no joy, only shock, silence, and the heavy perfume of disbelief. It had been a strange death. No blade had been drawn, no poison spilled, no wildfire lit. Just a bone, a simple chicken bone. The long table in the royal dining hall had been set with ceremonial grandeur, the feast offered as a display of peace and unity before the eyes of the realm. Aerys, ever watchful and paranoid, had insisted on a family meal. That, in itself, was unusual. He rarely broke bread in the presence of his own blood. Yet here they were. Queen Rhaella, her silver blonde hair tucked beneath a jeweled net, sat 2 seats to his left, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her face remained expressionless, carved in years of silent endurance. Across from her sat Princess Elia Martell, a delicate figure with haunted eyes, flanked by her 2 children, little Rhaenys, full of questions, and the infant Aegon, nestled in a wet nurse's arms nearby. The Kingsguard stood behind them all, statues in white cloaks. Esser Gerald Hightower, Esser Jaime Lannister, Esser Oswell went. None dared move, none dared speak. Prince Rhaegar had not attended. Aerys had noticed. And he was furious. He dares not show his face, the king muttered darkly between bites, voice dripping venom. My own son, too consumed with his harp and his north-born whore to honor his blood. Elia's back stiffened. The king noticed that, too. He turned to her with a twisted smile, lips red from Dornish wine. You think him noble, don't you? He whispered. Your precious prince. He crowned the wolf girl, Lyanna, in front of the realm. A Stark, of all things. Their blood is old and cold. Did you not feel it? The insult, or are you too busy plotting poison? He laughed then, a crackling, maddened sound that sent a shiver down the long table. Elia lowered her gaze. The queen said nothing. Even little Rhaenys seemed to understand the silence. It had become a habit of his, this obsession with Elia, with Dorne, with poison. Every meal, every cup, was treated as a battlefield, and he had made it known to all that Elia Martell and her children must taste every dish before he dared eat a bite. Tonight had been no different. She had sipped the soup, bit into the bread, touched the meat. Even the child Rhaenys had been made to nibble at the roast. Only then had the king allowed himself to eat. He was chewing on a piece of chicken, roasted over almond wood, basted in honey and orange, when he paused. His fork fell with a sharp clink. His eyes bulged. A strange sound came from his throat. A half cough, a strangled gasp. At first, no one moved. Aerys clawed at his throat. Then he stood, knocking his goblet over. The wine spilled red across the tablecloth like blood. The king was choking. The queen stood first, rushing toward him. The Kingsguard moved, too, Jaime the quickest, but what could they do? There was no blade to block, no assassin to slay. The Mad King flailed violently, his hands tearing at his throat as the bone, small, sharp, and treacherously placed, lodged deep. It had all happened in moments. And then, just like that, he collapsed. The King of the 7 Kingdoms fell forward, striking the edge of the table with a sickening crack. A final wheeze escaped his lips as his crown tilted and rolled, ringing softly against the stone floor. Silence. No one moved. Elia had frozen, one arm around Rhaenys. Rhaella knelt beside the body, her hand trembling as she reached toward him, but there was nothing to be done. No healer, no maester, no prayer. No foul play was found. The food had been tested. The wine tasted. The king had died, as any man might, from a single bone in his throat. And just like that, the realm had changed. In the rookery of the Red Keep, maesters moved with swift precision. Ink-stained fingers scratched across parchment, and messages were tied to the legs of sleek black birds who beat their wings in the pre-dawn gloom. News of a monarch's death could not wait. Every great house, from Winterfell to Sunspear, from the Eyrie to Aldtown, must be informed. Each message bore the same words, sealed in red wax stamped with the Targaryen sigil. King Aerys II, second of his name, has passed from this world. Crown Prince Rhaegar is summoned to assume the throne. The coronation will be held in the capital upon his return. All great lords of Westeros are called to swear fealty. The flock of ravens burst from the towers like black arrows loosed from the sky, scattering in all directions. And they were not the only messengers. In the stables below, riders were being prepared, fast, trusted men loyal to the realm, to the dragon throne. Saddles were tightened, scrolls secured. One by one, they galloped through the gates of the Red Keep and into the winding roads of Westeros. Their destination: Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The prince had vanished again, as he was known to do when the weight of the world pressed too heavily on his shoulders. He had not returned to the capital since his scandalous appearance at the tourney of Harrenhal, where his crowning of Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty had set 1,000 tongues wagging, and 1,000 alliances trembling. Some said he had gone to Dragonstone. Others whispered he was seen riding through the Trident, alone. More daring voices claimed he had disappeared with the Wolf Girl, and that nothing good could come from it. But now the realm had no time for riddles or rumors. A king was needed. In the Tower of the Hand, lords and advisors gathered in haste. Lord Carlton Chelsted, the hand of the king, sat pale and shaken, barely able to command his voice. Others spoke rapidly, urgently, planning funeral rites, debating security, arguing over coronation details and succession rights. The realm must not fall into confusion, said Lord Chelsted, voice hoarse. We must crown the prince before others move to act. The lions will stir. The stags will wonder. We must act swiftly. But where is Prince Rhaegar? Asked another. Where do we send the crown? No one had an answer. Only this: find Prince Rhaegar. In White Harbor, Storm's End, and Riverrun, lords received their ravens. Some read the messages with relief. Others with uncertainty. A few with quiet ambition. In Winterfell, a man stood beneath the weirwood tree reading the words that would change the fate of his daughter. Chapter 2: The Last Inheritance. The fire had burned out hours ago. Cold crept through the floorboards, curling up Harry's spine like smoke. He sat hunched in a creaky chair, elbows resting on his knees, staring blankly at the darkened hearth. The silence in the little cottage was complete, no ticking clock, no whisper of wind. Only the stillness of a place long untouched by joy. Ron had left, Hermione too. That truth clung to him like damp cloth, soaking through his skin, chilling him to the bone. It hadn't been a fight. Not really. Ron had grown bitter, impatient, angry with the constant fear and uncertainty. And when he finally snapped, it was Hermione who was forced to choose. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she simply whispered, "I'm sorry," and walked out into the night. Just like that, they were gone. Harry hadn't moved from that chair since. He didn't blame them, not entirely. What had he done, really? Run from place to place, hiding, scavenging, pretending he knew what he was doing. He wasn't Dumbledore. He wasn't even Moody. He was a half-trained teenager with a wand and a burden no one else wanted to carry. A hero in name only. He leaned back slowly, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling. "I should have been ready," he muttered. He had known. From the moment he looked into Quirrell's face in first year, from the echo of Voldemort's voice in the Forbidden Forest, from the dreams, the visions, the pain, he had always known the Dark Lord would return. And what had he done with that knowledge? Wasted it. He had wasted his time at Hogwarts goofing off, chasing a sense of normalcy that was never meant for him. He played chess with Ron, listened to Hermione panic over exams, flew through the skies chasing snitches, all the while pretending that he was just another student. He wasn't, and now, he was paying for it. "I should have spent every bloody day learning magic," he said bitterly. Real magic, combat spells, wards, tracking enchantments, not just school theory and essays. He pushed to his feet and began pacing, fists clenched at his sides. "They knew he'd come back," Harry hissed. "They all knew. Dumbledore, McGonagall, Lupin, Moody. They knew, and no one ever taught me how to fight him. They taught him how to take notes, how to brew potions, how to wave his wand the right way. But no one ever prepared him for war. Not even Dumbledore." The weight of it crushed his chest. Years of expectation, of whispered prophecy and distant gazes, all building to this moment. Alone, abandoned, unready. And for what? "So I can die in the dirt while the Ministry debates blood status laws," he whispered. He sat again, slower this time. "Tired. Why should it be me?" The words sounded childish, but he didn't care. He had never asked for this. Never asked to be a symbol. Never asked to be chosen. Voldemort had killed his parents, yes. But so had a dozen other Death Eaters to 100 other families. The war hadn't just taken James and Lily, it had torn apart half the wizarding world. So why wasn't anyone else fighting him? Why wasn't anyone else chosen? He thought of the prophecy. The one that said neither could live while the other survived. A few lines of ancient nonsense that doomed a child to death. Why should I fight for them? He asked softly. The magical world hadn't fought for him. They called him a hero when it was convenient. But in truth, they feared him, resented him, abandoned him. They cheered when he lived, and doubted him when he struggled. Where were they when I was starving in the cupboard? He asked the empty air. Where were they when they thought I was the heir of Slytherin? When they called me a liar in 4th year? No answer, only silence. The wand on the table glinted in the dim light. He looked at it for a long moment, jaw set. He could keep fighting, keep hunting Horcruxes, keep bleeding for a world that never once gave him more than a hollow title. Or he could walk away. No one would stop him. And if they did, he still had his wand. I owe them nothing, he said. This time, he believed it. The decision had come to him during a moment of weakness. But the more Harry thought about it, the more certain he became. There was no dramatic flash of rebellion, no sudden burst of courage. Just quiet resolve, calm, cold, steady, the kind of clarity that settled in slowly, like mist rising from the forest floor. He would leave, not tomorrow, not someday, now. He was done fighting for people who had never once fought for him. Done bleeding for a world that turned its back on him the moment it was inconvenient to stand beside him. Let Voldemort have it, let the Ministry collapse, let the Order play at heroism while the rot spread under their feet. Harry Potter was finished. He would go somewhere new. Somewhere far. He would disappear. Live. But there was one problem. He was out of money. Even if he escaped, even if he crossed borders or found refuge in some quiet corner of the world, he couldn't live on willpower alone. He needed gold, and only one place in the world held what was left of his parents' legacy. Gringotts. Harry remembered what Hagrid had once told him. That the goblins didn't take sides. They answered only to gold and to law. They would not care what the prophet printed or who ruled the Ministry. If his vault still existed, and if he could reach it, they would open it for him. They had to. Because otherwise, if he died, all of it, everything his parents had left behind, would end up in the hands of people who had never deserved it. The Weasleys, the Dursleys, Dumbledore's little collection of secret schemes. He wouldn't allow that, his wealth, his inheritance, his legacy. No one else would touch it. No more rash charges into danger. No more Gryffindor recklessness. He would move like a shadow. Quiet, invisible. He took a deep breath and wrapped the invisibility cloak tightly around himself. The fabric shimmered, then vanished into the air. Harry made his way to the nearest Muggle street. He stood by the roadside until a night bus trundled into view, headlights flickering in the mist. He didn't board it. Instead, he climbed silently to the roof, careful not to disturb even a single leaf of his cloak. He rode all the way to Charing Cross, unseen, unnoticed, untouchable. The leaky cauldron was nearly empty when he arrived. It used to be warm, welcoming, smelling of smoke, mead, and stew. Now it felt hollow, cold. The hearth was unlit. Most of the tables were pushed into corners. Only 2 wizards sat inside, hunched and whispering over a shared tankard. But it wasn't the silence that struck Harry the hardest. It was the posters. His own face stared at him from every wall, enchanted parchment fluttering slightly in the airless room. Undesirable no. 1. Wanted for questioning. Reward. 5,000 galleons. Do not approach. Report immediately. The image of himself looked haggard. Angry. Eyes shadowed, jaw clenched. It didn't even look like him anymore. He slipped past the wizards without a sound, heart hammering in his chest. He kept close to the wall and waited near the brick archway, breath held tight, until one of them stumbled out into the alley. Harry followed closely, stepping through the bricks just as they parted. Diagon Alley, or what was left of it. The cheerful cobblestones were cracked and blackened. Most of the shops had boarded windows and broken signs. The smell of sugar and roasted nuts was gone, replaced by dust and the faint tang of burned wood. It felt like a graveyard. Ollivanders was nothing but ash. Flourish and Blots was locked behind thick metal bars. Madame Malkin's shop stood dark, a single robe fluttering in the wind like a ghost sleeve. There were no laughing children. No parents dragging excited first years toward their first wand. Just silence, and the occasional Auror patrol, walking slow, hands on their wands, eyes scanning every shadow. Harry watched them pass. He knew. The Ministry had fallen. It no longer mattered what badge the Aurors wore. They belonged to Voldemort now, whether they admitted it or not. If they caught him, they wouldn't take him to court. They would take him to the Dark Lord. So he moved like a whisper. He silenced his steps with a charm, wrapped the cloak tighter, slid along the wall like a ghost that had forgotten its name. No noise, no light, no mistake. He reached Gringotts and waited, crouched in shadow near the marble steps. The goblin guards stood motionless at the doors, jagged armor gleaming in the half-light. The hall beyond was mostly empty now. People came to the alley out of desperation these days, not for errands. He could not afford to be seen. He waited, and waited, for the last witch to leave the bank, her cloak fluttering behind her, clutching a bag of what little coin remained. Then, silence. Harry slipped forward. He pressed himself against the massive stone pillar at the entrance, waited for one of the guards to turn his back, and moved. Past the threshold, into the marble hall. As he walked carefully across the gleaming floor, a wave of memories surged to the surface. His first time here, Hagrid at his side, the echo of his boots on stone, the sound of goblin claws scratching on ledgers, the wonder in his 11-year-old eyes. He could still remember the smell of new parchment, dragonhide, and gold. But now the vaults felt like tombs. The chandeliers flickered with green-tinted light. The goblins looked up from their desks with weary expressions. The goblin looked Harry over slowly, from the tips of his muddied boots to the faint gleam of his glasses beneath the hood of the invisibility cloak. Though Harry was hidden, he had revealed himself to the teller discreetly, away from the eyes of others, and now stood with the hood pushed back just enough to be seen. The goblin's lips curled into something resembling a smile. Sharp, menacing, almost pleased. "What can I do for you, Mr. Potter?" the goblin asked, voice like stone scraping metal. Harry didn't waste time. "I want to close my vault," he said flatly. "Permanently." The goblin raised a thin eyebrow. "Running away, Potter," he sneered. There was a challenge in his tone. A jab. The goblins were a warrior race. They did not flee, and they held no respect for those who did. Harry kept his voice steady. "No, I'm fighting, but when I fall, I want to make sure what's mine doesn't end up in the wrong hands." The goblin considered this. His smile grew wider, revealing a row of pointed teeth. "Wise choice." He snapped his long fingers, and another goblin appeared to escort Harry deeper into the bank. They walked in silence through the long corridor of dark iron doors and stone-carved archways until they reached a small room, an office, polished and grim. A second goblin sat behind a low desk, parchment and quills neatly arranged. His eyes gleamed in the torchlight as Harry entered. "Name?" the goblin demanded. "Harry Potter." The goblin looked him over. "And what do you wish to do?" "I want everything that belongs to me transferred out. I'm closing my account. For good." The goblin nodded slowly and drew out a scroll from a thick ledger. "Standard procedure requires magical verification. A few drops of blood." Here, he pointed to a small glowing circle on the page, to bind the contract. "Read it." Harry narrowed his eyes. He knew goblins, tricksters, wordsmiths. He read the fine lines carefully, his brow furrowing. The parchment stated, in sharp and precise language, that he would reclaim all items legally registered to his name, with the exception of goblin-forged artifacts, which would revert to the control of Gringotts upon account closure. That was fine. He didn't need goblin-forged weapons or jewelry. Just his gold, his artifacts, his birthright. He pricked his finger and let 3 drops fall on the parchment. The runes shimmered. The deal was sealed. "Please wait here," the goblin said. Harry nodded and sat stiffly in the chair, every muscle taut. The room was quiet, save for the scratching of the quill behind the desk. Minutes passed. Then the goblin spoke again, almost conversationally. "The ministry has been pressing us," he said without looking up. "They want us to pick a side." Harry glanced at him, and the goblin's smile returned. "We serve gold, not men. The ministry forgets that." Harry allowed a small, grim smile. He was about to reply when another goblin entered, holding a small trunk. It was black, etched with deep magical sigils, and bore a single silver clasp shaped like a fang. "This contains the entirety of your holdings," the seated goblin explained. "Gold, documents, heirlooms. Everything you owned in your vault, aside from goblin-made items, has been sealed within. The trunk responds to your blood and a spoken password." Harry touched the lock. "Serious," he whispered. The trunk clicked, then settled. "Bound." He slipped it into his enchanted pocket and stood. "Thank you. Good fortune in your war," the goblin said. Harry turned to go. He had nearly reached the exit when he froze. Bellatrix Lestrange had just entered the lobby. Even through the hood of his cloak, he recognized the cruel set of her jaw, the wild eyes, the madness coiled beneath her skin. Her long black robes trailed behind her like smoke, and in her arms was a package, wrapped, but not enough to conceal its identity from Harry's trained eyes. The sword of Gryffindor. He felt the heat rise behind his ribs. Rage, loss, memory. Sirius. She had killed Sirius. She had laughed when he fell. And now she was here, cradling something that did not belong to her. The sword, Godric Gryffindor's sword, was meant for the worthy. Not a twisted, murderous fanatic. But he couldn't act, not yet. Drawing a wand inside Gringotts was suicide. So he followed. Bellatrix was led by a goblin down a side corridor toward the carts. Harry slipped silently behind them, keeping close, invisible. When they reached the tracks, Bellatrix stepped into the cart with the goblin. Harry whispered a charm and stunned the goblin for just a moment, long enough to slip in behind them before the cart launched forward. The world blurred. The cart flew like lightning through the endless dark, metal groaning and tunnels racing past. Wind tore at his cloak, but Harry clung tight. Finally, the cart slowed. Lestrange vault. Bellatrix stepped out first, waiting impatiently as the goblin reactivated the vault doors. As she moved forward, the package still tucked under her arm, Harry slid forward. Quick, precise. His hand shot forward, fingers grasping the sword. Gone. Bellatrix spun, wild-eyed. My sword, she shrieked. You disgusting little thief. You vermin. She turned on the goblin, madness overtaking her. You, she screamed. You took it. I know you're kind, filthy, stealing things that were never yours. The goblin raised his hands, protesting, but Bellatrix didn't listen. Her wand flashed red. The goblin fell, lifeless. Harry had seen enough. He tore the cloak from his shoulders. Bellatrix turned. A grin split her face. Well, she whispered. Undesirable number one himself. She raised her wand. You're coming with me. Harry didn't speak. He moved. Spells burst in every direction. He dodged, rolled, cast, Stupefy, Expelliarmus, Protega, all quick, all basic, all defensive. Bellatrix cackled, unleashing dark magic that scorched the stone. The walls groaned with heat. And then, she screamed. Fiendfire. Flames exploded from her wand, massive, living fire, twisting and roaring like a dragon born of smoke and hatred. It ate the ground, climbed the walls, devoured everything. Her control slipped. The fire turned on her. Bellatrix screamed as the cursed flames consumed her. Her robes caught, her wand dropped. Her body vanished in a storm of fire and ash. The vault door collapsed. From deep inside, Harry heard a scream, not hers. Something else. Something inhuman. Then silence. The Horcrux. Destroyed. The fire surged outward. Harry ran. He sprinted down the tunnel, breath burning in his chest, heart pounding like a drum. Then, chains, claws, a dragon, a massive white dragon, chained and writhing in agony. Harry didn't think. He couldn't. He raised his wand, screamed, Reducto, and shattered the chains. Go, he shouted as he climbed on its back. Fly. The dragon roared, reared back. Then dove, not up, down, into a vast well of darkness below the bank. And Harry, clinging to its back, vanished into the depths. Chapter 3 The Silent Winter. Winter Town was quieter than usual. Even for a place that prided itself on silence. The snow had fallen lightly the night before, leaving a soft white dust across the stone rooftops and timber eaves. Smoke curled gently from chimneys. The sky was gray, with patches of pale light drifting between clouds like forgotten ghosts. The town slumbered in its usual rhythm, slow, practical, untouched by urgency. At the far edge of the main road, nestled between a blacksmith's forge and an old tannery long abandoned, stood the Frozen Tongue, the only inn worth noting in Winter Town. Its faded sign swung gently in the wind, carved in the shape of a frozen tongue, cracked but still hanging on. Inside, warmth and quiet ruled. The Frozen Tongue was rarely crowded. It came to life only when Winterfell itself did, during harvest feasts, marriages, or royal visits. Otherwise, the inn remained half empty. Clean, quiet, the kind of place where travelers passed through, left coin on the table, and vanished. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. Candles flickered along the walls. A few merchants sat at the far side of the room, nursing mugs of warm cider, whispering about road conditions and grain prices. Two serving girls moved from table to table with practiced efficiency. The innkeeper, a stout woman with gray streaks in her braids, stood behind the counter, wiping a clean tankard with a cleaner cloth. And in the corner, the stranger sat. He wore a cloak of heavy furs, thick, layered, far more than was needed for the mild northern chill. It swallowed him, hood drawn low over his face, gloves covering his hands. Only the pale tip of his nose was visible, half reddened by the firelight. He said nothing. He drank slowly from a battered mug of strong ale, barely glancing at the others in the room. No one paid him much mind. The northerners, after all, were not curious people. They valued silence. They respected distance. And if a man came to their town with his face covered and his voice quiet, it was not their business to wonder why. The door banged open. 2 Winterfell guards entered, stomping their boots against the threshold, shaking off bits of snow. One was tall and wide-shouldered with a bit of a limp, the other younger with a bristled beard and red ears. They were laughing. "Gods, it's colder in the castle than it is out here," the younger said, stripping off his gloves. "I swear the maester leaves the windows open just to freeze us out." "You'd be frozen regardless," the older one grunted. "That skin of yours wouldn't survive a real winter." The innkeeper offered them a nod, already reaching for the ale. "First round's warm," she said. "Second one's not. Just like your heart, Marta," the older guard muttered with a grin. They sat at the nearest table, letting their gear clank softly against the wooden benches. Steam rose from their mugs. It was then the younger guard said it, loud enough to carry to every ear in the room. "So what now? The king's dead. Who wears the crown?" The words cut through the warmth like a sudden breeze. The stranger in the corner looked up. Just a tilt of the hood. Just a moment of stillness. The innkeeper turned first, brows knitting. "What do you mean, the king is dead?" she asked, placing her hands on the bar. The older guard took a drink, then shrugged. "It's true. Aerys Targaryen is dead, died quietly, they say. Peacefully in his bed. Never thought I'd hear peaceful and mad king in the same sentence," the younger added with a snort. "Ravens were sent out last night," the older continued. "Lord Stark got one this morning. Whole of Westeros will know by sundown." "Peacefully," Marta repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it bitter. "He burned half his court alive. Peaceful is not the death I'd imagined for him." The guards chuckled, and talk resumed, names of heirs, rumors of Rhaegar's whereabouts, talk of ravens and oaths and coming storms. But the stranger had already risen. His movement was quick, almost too quick. He left the mug half full on the table, the foam still clinging to the rim. He walked without sound, slipping past the tables like smoke, and took the stairs 2 at a time. He vanished into the shadows above. The innkeeper watched him go, narrowing her eyes slightly. The guards didn't notice, neither did the merchants. But Marta, who had run this place for 3 decades and served more travelers than she could count, felt a flicker in her chest. A whisper of instinct. There was something about that man in the cloak. Something strange, and the north did not suffer strangeness easily. Upstairs, the narrow hallway creaked beneath the stranger's boots. The inn's second floor was dim, lit only by a single oil lantern swaying gently on a rusted hook. The scent of firewood and boiled onions lingered faintly in the air. The man stopped before a plain door near the end of the hall. Then he knocked 3 times. A pattern, sharp, pause, soft, deliberate and unmistakable. From the other side came a voice. "Arthur, is that you?" It was a man's voice, but light, elegant, too smooth to belong to a soldier or a smith. It danced through the door like the brush of silk. Arthur Dane smiled beneath his hood. "Yes." There was a short silence. "Just a moment," the voice replied. Arthur stood still, listening to faint sounds within, fabric shifting, hurried steps, the thump of something falling over. He glanced down the hall once, ensuring it was empty. Then the door cracked open, and he slipped inside without a word. The room was warm. A single candle flickered on the bedside table, its wax pooling over a stack of books. The window had been shuttered tightly, blocking any sight from the street below. Arthur's eyes swept the room in one trained motion. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled, pillows discarded, a blanket kicked to the floor. He noted the flush on the cheeks of Lyanna Stark, standing near the hearth, pulling a gray cloak around her shoulders. Her dark hair was disheveled, her expression wary but proud. On the far side of the room stood Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The Silver Prince. His hair was in a loose braid, a silver strand clinging to his temple with sweat. His tunic was fastened, but hastily, 3 buttons misaligned. He stood upright, regal as ever, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the suddenness of Arthur's visit. He blinked. Arthur. Without waiting for a question, Arthur spoke. The king is dead. Rhaegar froze. Lyanna inhaled sharply. What? Rhaegar asked. How? Arthur shook his head. I don't know. The guards downstairs were speaking of it. Aerys died in the night. Ravens were sent. Lord Stark received word this morning. The entire realm will know by nightfall. Rhaegar's mouth parted, his brow furrowing. Are you certain? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls. The candle flickered. The wind outside howled against the shutters. Then Rhaegar turned from them, placing both hands on the table, his head bowed. When? He whispered. Arthur stepped closer. We don't have time for mourning. You must return to King's Landing immediately. The court will descend into chaos. And there are still lords who remember what Aerys did to you. Lyanna looked between them, tension rising in her jaw. But he was your father, she said quietly. Rhaegar's lips tightened. He was a tyrant, and he disinherited me in one of his moments. Arthur nodded grimly. Exactly. The small council may use that to push for visories. Rhaegar turned sharply. He's a child, which makes him easy to control. They both knew what that meant. Regents, puppets, vultures. Men like Tywin Lannister. Shadows danced along the walls of the small room, casting shifting shapes across the bedsheets and the quiet figures within. Rhaegar stood near the hearth, staring into the fire, its embers crackling like whispers of forgotten songs. Lyanna sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her cloak. Arthur stood near the door, silent and patient. I must go, Rhaegar said at last. His voice was soft, but resolute. Lyanna looked up, her gray eyes full of conflict. Then let me come with you. Rhaegar turned. No, you must return to Winterfell. She frowned, lips parting to protest, but he crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before her. Lyanna, he said, taking her hands gently in his. This is no longer a matter of stolen glances and secret vows. My father is dead, and the realm will soon look to me. I must claim the throne not as a fugitive prince, but as the rightful heir. He held her gaze. And once I am crowned, I will go to your father, as a king, not a lover. I will bring a proper contract, noble and binding. I will ask for your hand with honor. She hesitated, but her heart betrayed her. That's what you want. That is what you deserve. Arthur, leaning against the wall, nodded in agreement. He's right. If you go back now, no one will know your absence. But if we're caught together, the realm may never forgive it. Not now. Lyanna sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I was ready to elope with you. Rhaegar smiled. And that means more to me than you know. She smiled back. But if I can marry you with my father's blessing, that would be better. Arthur turned toward the window and gently pushed it open. The wind whispered through the cracks. Then we'd best be off, he said. We shouldn't be seen leaving. The 3 left the inn not as a prince, a lady, and a knight, but as 3 cloaked men with hoods drawn low. Rhaegar wore simple riding leathers, his silver hair tucked beneath a faded black hood. Arthur walked with purpose, a blade hidden beneath his travel cloak. Lyanna, slender and sure-footed, wore a worn gray tunic and woolen trousers, her long dark hair braided tight and pinned beneath a fur-lined cap. To any onlooker, they were no different than travelers heading south for better weather. They left the inn through the back gate. No one saw them go. The road was quiet, flanked by pine trees and frozen shrubs. Lyanna led the way, her boots crunching softly on the snow. This way, she said, guiding them toward a sloping hill beside an old stone wall. The trail turned sharply, descending into a narrow gorge choked with roots and hidden behind a thicket of thornbush. She brushed them aside with practiced ease. At the base of the slope lay a small, unmarked cave, little more than a jagged hole beneath the roots of an ancient oak. Moss clung to the stones. No torchlight, no sigils, no sign of use. But it was real, a secret held by the Starks for generations. In case Winterfell ever falls, Lyanna explained. There are other passages, deeper ones. But this is the only one I've used. I've come and gone through here since I was 10. Rhaegar raised an eyebrow. You've been escaping the castle since you were 10. She smirked. You haven't met my brothers. They stood at the mouth of the cave. Arthur turned away, giving them privacy. Rhaegar stepped forward, brushing snow from Lyanna's cloak, fingers lingering for a breath too long. You'll be safe, he asked quietly. She nodded. My father is distracted. My brothers are in the Riverlands for Brandon's betrothal. I'll slip back into my room before anyone notices I'm gone. He looked at her for a long moment. You'll wait for me. Lyanna stepped closer. She wrapped her arms around him and held tight, her voice a whisper against his chest. I'll wait for the day we're wed, Rhaegar. And not a moment less. His arms encircled her, strong and warm despite the cold. For a moment, time stood still. The snow fell around them in silence. The world held its breath. He pressed a kiss to her brow. I will return for you. As your king, and your husband. She smiled against his chest. Then go, before I change my mind and come with you. She turned, stepped into the cave, and vanished into the shadows of Winterfell's roots. Rhaegar stood there a moment longer. Arthur approached him. You did the right thing, the knight said. Rhaegar nodded once, watching the darkness where she'd gone. I hope so. Then they mounted their horses and rode south, toward power, toward danger, toward a crown that waited, and the realm that would never be the same. Chapter 4 A Stranger in the Snow. Harry stirred. The ache was the first thing he noticed, a dull, relentless pain radiating from his back, his legs, his arms, his head. His entire body throbbed like he'd been trampled by a herd of centaurs. Then came the cold, not the damp chill of the forbidden forest, not the sharp wind that blew across the grounds at Hogwarts in winter. This was different. This was deep cold, the kind that settled into your bones and refused to leave. He opened his eyes slowly. A ceiling of glistening stone loomed above him, jagged and frost-laced. The dim light filtering into the cavern came from the mouth of the cave some distance away. And then he saw it. The dragon. Its massive white head rested just a few feet from where he lay. Harry froze. Its eye, milky and still, was the size of a full-grown pumpkin. Steam curled faintly from its nostrils. He didn't breathe. His hands twitched, ready to reach for his wand. But the beast didn't move. Sleeping. Or dead. Please be dead. Harry very, very carefully pushed himself up, biting back a hiss as his muscles screamed in protest. Every limb felt bruised. His robes were torn and stiff with soot. His boots were scuffed. The last memory he had was of Gringotts, of fire, of flying. And then darkness. His gaze swept the cavern. He had no idea where he was. Then, beside the dragon's leg, something gleamed. The sword of Gryffindor, but it wasn't as he remembered it. The blade had changed. No longer the elegant silver longsword with rubies in the hilt, now it was something ancient, heavier, thicker. A two-handed broadsword, weathered and brutal, as though it had been reforged for war. He reached for it cautiously. The moment his fingers wrapped around the hilt, something pulsed beneath his skin, faint, warm, familiar. Magic. His magic. The sword recognized him. As if responding to his will, the sword shifted, shrinking with a slow shimmer of steel until it was the size of a dagger. Compact, lightweight, but still deadly. Harry blinked. Bloody hell. He concentrated again. The blade lengthened in his hand, became a short sword. Then a curved scimitar. Then, with a final thought, back into a dagger. He tucked it into his belt. Handy. In his pocket he had his magical trunk from Gringotts, charmed and sealed. Somehow, it had survived the dragon ride and the fire. He opened it carefully, found it filled with gold, silver and copper coins and bars. He also had so many books. He wondered where does it all come from because he didn't have this much money or books. Then he remembered that before his death Sirius had made him his heir. The moleskin pouch also had some supplies, spare clothes, a few enchanted items Hermione bought for their mission, and the rest of his earthly belongings. At least he wasn't completely stranded. Then came the decision. Stay, or leave. He turned his gaze to the sleeping dragon. Its chest rose and fell like the heaving of a mountain. Every so often, one of its massive claws twitched. It wouldn't sleep forever, and when it woke, I am not going to be breakfast, he muttered. He stood with effort, gritting his teeth. His legs were stiff, his balance off, but he managed to sling the trunk over his shoulder and make his way to the cave entrance. The moment he stepped into the light, the cold hit him like a wall. His breath froze in front of his face. The wind sliced through his torn robes like knives. Snow blanketed the world beyond the cave. Endless white, jagged peaks in the distance. A vast wilderness, unfamiliar. Wherever he was, it wasn't Britain. Harry stared out at the world in disbelief. Where the hell am I? No sign of people, no towns, no roads. He had no idea which direction to go. No idea what this land was. But one thing was certain, he couldn't stay here. He drew his wand and muttered a string of protective spells. Impervious, calefactum, protega fregus. Warmth spread through his limbs, forming a barrier against the wind. He pulled out a heavy cloak from the trunk, thanked Merlin for Sirius's hoarding instincts, and wrapped it around himself. Then he began to walk, step by step, through the snow, away from the cave, away from the dragon, and into a land where magic would be strange, the stars unfamiliar, and his name unknown. The wind howled low through the pines like a wolf mourning the death of summer. Oliver tugged his cloak tighter around his shoulders, thick fingers red with cold as he adjusted the strap of the worn crossbow on his back. Snow crunched under his boots with each slow, labored step. He kept his eyes low, scanning the ground for tracks, signs of movement, anything with blood and meat to keep them through another night. Behind him, Doran grumbled as he kicked at a buried stone. Should have stayed in bed, ain't nothin' in this God's cursed forest. Oliver didn't answer. He was too busy following the faintest trail he'd found, wolf prints, light and scattered, already half sunk into fresh snow. You see something? Doran asked, stepping closer. Maybe, Oliver muttered. Wolves. Or dog, if we're unlucky. Don't care if it's a rat with antlers. I'd spit roast anything at this point. Oliver gave a dry grunt. You'd roast your own foot if you thought it'd feed you. Doran said, not even joking. They trudged on in silence, breath misting before them. The cold bit through even the thickest furs. The north was unforgiving this deep into the woods, closer to the mountains, where even sunlight seemed hesitant to fall. Oliver wasn't a hunter by trade. He was a miller, like his father before him, grinding barley and oats by the stream near Dreadfort. But in the north, you had to be a bit of everything. Miller in summer, hunter in fall, forager in spring, survivor in winter. Real winter was coming, and they weren't ready. We should turn back soon, Doran muttered. If we don't freeze, we'll starve. Oliver was about to agree, until he saw something in the snow. A shape, still, small, slumped over a mound of frost. He raised a hand, and Doran stopped beside him. What is that? Doran asked. Oliver narrowed his eyes. A man. They approached cautiously, steps crunching softer now, breath tight in their lungs. The figure was face down, wrapped in a torn cloak that wasn't made for this kind of cold. The boots were soft leather, polished but scuffed. The hair, black and messy, was dusted with snow. Oliver crouched beside the body. He's alive, he said, surprised. Breathing. Doran frowned. Don't look like any Northman I've seen. Oliver nodded. Clothes are too soft, cut like southern wear. Might be a lord. Doran muttered. Or a merchant, or a runaway groom. Either way, poor bastard looks half frozen. Oliver rolled the man onto his side. He looked young, barely a man grown. Pale, bruised, but breathing. Doran crouched and patted down the cloak. No coin, no ring, not even a weapon. Maybe he was robbed, maybe he's just dumb. Oliver looked at him. He'll die out here if we leave him. Doran shrugged. So, Oliver said, if he is a lord, and we save him, we might earn something for our trouble. Doran raised a brow, unconvinced. A warm bed, at least, Oliver pressed. Maybe silver, maybe a place in his hall. Doran exhaled through his nose. You're an idiot. Oliver smiled, but a warm one. Together, they lifted the stranger, each taking a side under his arms. He was lighter than expected, thin, but muscled. As they struggled back toward the mill, Doran continued grumbling, though less angrily now. By the time they reached Oliver's mill, the sun had begun to set behind the trees. The wind cut harder, but the little structure still stood, wooden walls solid, chimney billowing smoke, the grindstone frozen in place beside the stream. They opened the door and brought the boy inside. Oliver cleared the low bench near the fire, stoked the coals, and placed the stranger down as close to the heat as possible. His skin was like ice. Get water, Oliver ordered. Boil it, he needs warmth. As Oliver sat beside the boy, watching the flames flicker across his pale face, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had just picked up more than a starving traveler. Much more. The wind had howled through the trees all through the night. Inside the small stone mill, the fire still crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows over the pale, unmoving form of the stranger. He had not woken once in over a full day, though he muttered now and again, whispers in a foreign tongue, sometimes broken words in a common accent not quite northern. Oliver, seated on a stool near the hearth, dabbed a warm cloth along the stranger's forehead. Beside him sat a bowl of porridge, made from oats borrowed off Old May, who lived up the ridge and still had enough to lend if you asked with the right tone and helped stack her firewood. I don't like this, muttered Doran, pacing slowly behind him. Oliver didn't look up. The fever's breaking. That's something. Doran crossed his arms. His thick beard was dusted with frost, and his eyes, always sharp from years of chiseling stone, flicked toward the young man sprawled in a borrowed blanket. He still hasn't woken, and he talks in his sleep. Says strange things. Names I've never heard. He'll wake when he's ready. Oliver gently spooned a bit of porridge toward the stranger's lips. Help me lift his head. Grumbling, Doran stepped over and propped the boy up by the shoulders. Together they fed him slowly, bit by bit. He swallowed. That was enough. He's no Northman, Doran said as he set the boy down again. Too thin, too soft in the face. But those clothes, expensive make. I'm telling you, he's a lord. Oliver didn't answer. He only glanced once more at the fine stitching on the boy's tattered robe, at the cloak clasp in the shape of a lion's head, though not like any lion heraldry Oliver knew. Doran moved to the window and looked out toward the trees. The snow had eased for now, though clouds still brooded on the horizon. Winter had not yet finished speaking. That evening, back in Doran's modest stone cottage at the edge of the forest, his daughters huddled by the hearth under a patched quilt. Elsa, the elder at 6, was brushing her sister's tangled hair with a carved wooden comb. Nina, only 4, stared up at her father as he stirred a pot of thin turnip stew. You found a lord? Elsa asked, wide-eyed. Doran, crouched by the fire, smiled. I, little Frostling, me and your Uncle Ollie pulled him from the snow like a turnip from frozen soil. Was he wearing a crown? Nina asked. Doran chuckled. No, Petal, lords don't wear crowns unless they're kings. But he had fine boots, and his hands weren't rough. And if he's not a lord, then I'm a lady. I wanna see him, Elsa cried. Me too, Nina added, clapping. Behind them, Maria, Doran's wife, stood with arms folded. Her expression was more skeptical than amused. Don't fill their heads with stories, Doran Stone. You say you've found a lord, but you also said last winter we'd have a boar roast. I've yet to taste it. Doran grinned sheepishly. This time it's true, wife. I've seen it. He'll wake, and when he does, he'll thank us. He'll reward us. With what? She asked flatly. Words. Doran walked over, kissed her cheek. Maybe coin, maybe land, maybe enough so our girls never go to bed hungry again. Maria sighed, but didn't push him further. The next morning, Doran brought Elsa and Nina to Oliver's mill. The little girls wore their best, coats a size too large, mittens too short at the wrists, and mismatched boots. But their faces shone with excitement. Inside, the fire had been stoked again. Oliver looked up from the hearth and smiled when he saw them. You brought the storm with you, he said. They wanted to meet a lord, Doran replied. Let's hope he wakes up soon, then. The two girls tiptoed toward the low cot where Harry still slept. Nina leaned in, eyes wide. He's not very big, she whispered. Shush, Elsa hissed. He's dreaming. Lords dream about battles and castles. Or feasts, Nina added with glee. Oliver chuckled softly, watching them. Even Doran's hard expression softened. Smoke drifted softly from the chimney as Oliver and Doran sat in the small living area, hunched near the hearth with tin mugs of weak ale in hand. The heat of the fire barely reached their toes, and the draft through the stone walls made sure they never forgot what season ruled. I say we try again tomorrow, Doran muttered, his voice low. There's sign near the Black Pine Ridge. Rabbit tracks, maybe fox. If we're lucky, even a snow hen. Oliver nodded. We need something. We can't last like this. Our storage is half what it should be. If we don't hunt, we'll be chewing bark by new moon. Oliver ran a hand through his beard. We could ask Old May for another barrel of oats. She already gave what she could, Doran said. And with that stranger eating our porridge, our rations thinner than a Southron lord's bones. Despite the grumble, there was no true resentment in his voice. Only weariness. He wakes up and gives us a pouch of gold, Doran added, then maybe I'll believe the gods haven't forgotten us. From the small bedroom behind the curtain, quiet voices floated in, whispers and giggles. Elsa and Nina had been given a serious task, to watch over the stranger while the men talked. And they took the job to heart. He doesn't look dangerous, Elsa whispered, crouching near the edge of the cot. He looks like a prince, Nina said, eyes wide. He's got soft hair. Look how messy it is. I bet he's been in a battle, Nina said. That's what the scar is for. Elsa leaned closer and gently brushed a lock of hair from the stranger's forehead. A lightning bolt-shaped scar. She gasped. Look, that's not a battle scar. That's a magic scar. Nina's mouth dropped open. Is he a sorcerer? Or a knight? A magic knight? Maybe he fought giants. Or dragons. Do you think he lives in a castle? Of course he does. Lords always do. They sat, watching him in silence for a moment, their eyes full of wonder. Then the man stirred. He shifted, a low groan escaping his lips. His hand twitched. His eyes, green, startlingly bright, fluttered open for the first time. Elsa jumped to her feet. He's waking. She bolted out of the room like a thunderbolt, shouting. Dad, Uncle Ollie, the Lord's waking up. The mugs were set down. Chairs scraped. Both men rushed through the curtain like a pair of startled hounds. There he was, lying on the cot, wrapped in fur blankets, his face pale but no longer deathly. He blinked slowly, dazed, eyes moving from the ceiling to the figures crowding around him. Oliver stepped forward carefully. Are you all right, my lord? The stranger groaned softly, his voice hoarse and dry. Yes, I'm all right. Doran leaned in, hopeful. What house are you from, my lord? For a moment, the man's brow furrowed as if the question confused him. His lips parted. Then, with a ragged breath, he croaked, Gryffindor. And he slumped back into sleep. The room went still. Oliver exchanged a glance with Doran. Gryffindor, he repeated slowly. Never heard of a northern house by that name. Nor have I, Doran said. But he's a lord. Only lords call themselves by house. Maybe he's Southron. Maybe even from Aldtown or King's Landing. Oliver rubbed his chin. Could be. Down there, they've got hundreds of lords. Some fancy, some poor. Doran grinned, the first true smile in days. Well, if this one's fancy and rich, that's all the same to me. Hope stirred between them, fragile but real. Because maybe, just maybe, the man in the cot wasn't just a lost traveler. Maybe he was the answer they'd been waiting for. Chapter 5 Lord Gryffindor in the Snow. The second time Harry Potter opened his eyes, it wasn't with panic, but with an exhausted reluctance. His eyelids felt heavy, crusted with dried sweat and frost. For a long moment, he lay still, breathing shallowly, afraid that if he moved, the pain would return. But it didn't, not entirely, only a dull ache in his bones, the kind that reminded him he had been dragged through hell and back. He blinked. The ceiling above him was made of dark, uneven wooden beams, thick with age and spiderwebs in the corners. The scent of smoke, pine sap, and something earthy, maybe dried meat or animal fur, hung in the air. He turned his head slowly, eyes scanning the room. Stone walls, roughly cut, stacked by hand, not the neat, symmetrical stonework of wizard-built cottages. There was no wallpaper, no insulation. The gaps between the stones were packed with straw and mud. On one wall hung a rusty iron hook, and a few pieces of firewood leaned in a corner beside a blackened hearth. There was no light switch. No lamp, just a dying fire casting soft orange glows across the floorboards. No hum of electricity, no magical flicker, no enchanted ceiling. Just silence. And cold. The bed creaked beneath him as he shifted. It was barely a bed at all, a wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw and old cloth, uneven and lumpy. One corner of the bed frame dug into his back, forcing him to lay twisted to avoid the discomfort. A heavy fur blanket, coarse and unfamiliar, was wrapped around him. He had no idea what kind of animal it came from. It smelled faintly like smoke and rain. For a few minutes, Harry just sat there, slowly sitting up, rubbing his aching temples. Where am I? He looked toward the shuttered window. Light filtered through the cracks in slanted gray beams, but there was no glow of magic. No streetlights outside, no moving pictures on the walls. No radio, no Daily Prophet, no trace of the modern wizarding world or the Muggle world either. Just old stone, old wood, and the ever-present cold. This isn't England. This isn't home. This isn't the wizarding world either. Not the part one no. He swung his legs off the bed, grimacing at the cold touch of the floor beneath his bare feet. His boots, yes, there they were, neatly placed near the fireplace. His wand, to his relief, lay just within arm's reach atop a rough-hewn table. He grasped it quickly, still warm in his hand. Still his. He exhaled in relief, then looked around again, slowly rising to his feet. The room was small, barely larger than a cupboard at the Dursleys'. A wooden chair sat near the hearth. There was a tin cup and a folded cloth on the table. In the far corner, a curtain hung loosely from a rope, blocking off what he assumed was the entrance to the rest of the cottage. Who brought me here? His memories were foggy. He remembered the cave, the dragon, the snow. He remembered walking aimlessly through endless white, his fingers numb, his breath ragged. And then, nothing. Someone had brought him here. Someone had saved him. But were they wizard, muggle, something else? He didn't know. Harry gripped his wand tighter and took a cautious step toward the curtain. He wasn't ready to fight, but he wasn't about to be caught off guard again either. Think, assess, survive. The door creaked open with a deep groan as Harry stepped into the cold morning light. A sharp gust of wind nipped at his face, and the furs around his shoulders rustled in protest. He blinked against the brightness, snow glittered beneath the rising sun, and the world outside was still white and gray. There were no lamp posts, no chimneys coughing up steam, no muggle cars passing by. Only trees, stone, ice. He turned to look at the building behind him. It wasn't a house in the usual sense. A mill, he realized. A medieval stone mill, sturdy but old. The mill's tower stood several feet taller than the rest of the structure, capped with a wooden fan, its large blades slowly turning with the wind. The roof was patched with thick slabs of bark and moss, and a narrow frozen stream snaked beside the building, long since dried for winter. Harry stared at the rotating fan and the simplicity of the mill's construction. Stone, timber, nails forged by hand. This isn't London. This isn't even anywhere in England. And it's not summer anymore. He remembered it clearly. It had been late June in Britain when he took that dragon ride straight through the vault and into fire. Which meant this couldn't be anywhere nearby. Either I've time traveled, or the dragon dropped me into the farthest north imaginable. Harry stood in the snow, arms folded, trying to make sense of it all, when he heard the sound. Footsteps, quick ones, snow crunching, small voices. He turned just in time to see two little girls come darting up the hill toward him, scarves flapping, cheeks red with cold and excitement. They were bundled tightly in wool and fur cloaks, though everything they wore looked worn and patched with loving care. The taller of the two had straw-colored hair tied in a crooked braid. The younger one had dark curls poking out from beneath her hood. They skidded to a stop just before him, both beaming up at him with awe. Then, with great effort, they each attempted a formal bow, awkward, lopsided, and entirely charming. Harry, against every tired bone in his body, smiled. "Are you up, m'lord?" the older girl asked cautiously. Harry blinked. "I'm awake, yes," he said, voice still hoarse. "But why are you calling me, Lord?" The little girl straightened up, puzzled by his question. "Me papa said you were Lord Gryffindor. That you were going to take us to your castle. And give us gold, and silver, because we saved you from the snow." She spoke with complete certainty, as if the future had already been written. Harry's eyebrows lifted. Did he now? The younger girl nodded fiercely, her blue eyes wide. "He said you'd make us rich." Harry rubbed a hand over his face. So that was it. They thought he was a lord, a noble, someone important, someone with coin, maybe even a castle. Gryffindor, House Gryffindor, of course. That's what he'd mumbled when they asked for his name, his house, before he passed out. And here, apparently, that meant everything. "What are your names?" Harry asked gently. "I'm Elsa," said the older girl, puffing her chest proudly. "I'm 6. And I'm Nina," the smaller one added quickly. "I'm 4. And I'm brave." "You certainly are," Harry replied, trying not to chuckle. He leaned forward slightly. "Elsa, Nina, is your papa the man who found me?" They nodded in unison. "Papa and Uncle Ollie," Elsa explained. "They went hunting this morning. We don't have much to eat." Nina's small voice piped in. "Only turnips. I don't like turnips." Harry's smile faded slightly. The pieces clicked together. These people were poor, struggling, likely close to starving, and now they believed they had rescued a lord who would reward them. Maybe they were depending on it. Maybe it was the only hope they had. He felt a pang deep in his chest. They saved him, not knowing who he was. And now they waited, expecting salvation. Harry exhaled slowly and crouched so he was eye level with them. "You two should head back to your cottage," he said gently. "It's cold, and I'm going to rest a little longer, all right?" Nina pouted, but Elsa took her hand and nodded. "We'll tell Mama you're awake, Lord Gryffindor." And off they ran, scarves trailing, laughter echoing. Harry stood there a while longer, snow crunching beneath his boots, eyes fixed on the woods beyond the mill. He didn't know what kind of world he'd fallen into. But it was clear now, he was someone here. And he'd have to decide what to do with that. Harry stepped back inside the mill and closed the wooden door behind him with care. The warmth of the hearth welcomed him again, though the fire had begun to dim. He checked the room quickly. No one in the bedchamber, no shadows behind the curtain, no voices outside the shutters. Alone. Good. He took out the magical trunk he got from Gringotts. Its exterior was charmed to look like a simple wooden chest but enchanted with all sort of protection and even muggle and wizard repellent ward. Harry whispered the unlocking phrase and let a few drops of blood touch the rune-latched clasp. The lock clicked open, and the illusion shimmered away. Inside, mountains of gold, silver, and bronze coins glittered faintly in the firelight, galleons, sickles, and nuts by the hundreds of thousands, enchanted to never tarnish. Atop the heaps were smaller pouches of rare gems, books and scrolls from the black vaults, and many magical artifacts. Harry had never felt so rich. But now, staring into that trunk, he realized just how much he truly had. Way too much. He rummaged through the coins and pulled out 2 heavy handfuls, galleons and sickles, ignoring the nuts. He grabbed a coarse linen cloth from beside the fire, wrapped the coins into it, and tied the corners into a makeshift pouch. It won't save them forever, but it'll buy them many years. He set the pouch aside, then paused, frowning. Wait. A new thought crept in. When his rescuers had found him, he'd had nothing on him. No cloak, no pack, no visible coin. If he suddenly handed them a pouch of gold out of thin air, they'd ask questions. Dangerous questions. Where did he get it? Did he steal it? Where was he hiding it? Harry didn't want to lie. But he also didn't want to start explaining magic vaults and enchanted trunks just yet, not in a place where he wasn't sure how magic was treated. Better to leave. Return with the coin. Let them assume I buried it in the snow. Or kept it hidden nearby. It wasn't perfect, but it was safer than revealing the truth. And if he was leaving for a bit, he might as well hunt. He looked again at the dwindling supplies in the room, dry roots, empty bowls, and the faint smell of desperation lingering behind the fur-lined blankets. The girls were half-starved. And Harry don't know how to hunt. With magic, it was hardly a challenge. He grabbed his wand and stepped back outside. The snow had grown deeper since earlier. Flakes fell gently, drifting across the windmill's blades. The trees beyond the hill stirred, beckoning. He held his wand flat in his palm. Point me, elk. The wand trembled. Slowly, it rotated and pointed west, quivering slightly in that direction. Harry tucked the pouch of coins under his cloak, braced against the wind, and started walking, his boots crunching through the frozen drifts. The forest swallowed him quickly. Trees, tall and skeletal, loomed like sentinels over the snow-covered earth. The wind whispered through their branches, and the sky above was veiled in cloud. Harry walked with purpose, wand guiding him deeper and deeper into the woods. Frost clung to the bark. No birdsong, no footprints. Just endless white. And yet, he felt calm. For the first time since arriving, he felt like he had a purpose. Something he could do. Something he could give. A wizard may not have a castle, but I can still give them warmth. Food, hope, and in the silence of the forest, with his wand glowing softly at the tip, Harry Potter hunted, not for glory, not for survival, but to repay a kindness. Chapter 6: The Hunt for Winter's Feast. The sun was low in the pale winter sky, casting long blue shadows over the frozen forest as Doran and Oliver trudged up the narrow path leading to the mill. Snow clung to the furs wrapped around their shoulders, and their hands were red from cold, but their spirits were high, for the first time in days. 4 rabbits dangled from Oliver's belt, freshly snared and already gutted. 4, Doran said with a grin, clapping his friend on the back. 4 fine beasts, and fat too. That's a feast if I've ever seen one. Aye, Oliver agreed, smiling through his cracked lips. Elsa and Nina'll be grinning for a week. Might even get broth for the old bones. They rounded the hill and approached the mill, its tall wooden blades creaking slightly in the northern breeze. Smoke no longer curled from the chimney. The door, usually latched from the inside, was ajar. Oliver slowed. Doran raised an eyebrow. Do you think the Lord is up? Maybe, Oliver muttered. They pushed the door open. Inside, the fire was out. The room was colder than the snow. The bed where the stranger had rested was empty, the blanket thrown aside. A faint trace of footprints marred the dusting of snow that had crept in under the door. The silence swallowed the room whole. Oliver dropped the rabbits gently onto the table, then turned in a slow circle. "Lord Gryffindor," he called, though his voice had no strength. "You in here?" Doran opened the cupboard, as if expecting to find the man hidden inside. "Nothing. Gone," Doran said simply, his voice flat. "He's gone." Oliver sat heavily on a stool. He didn't even say thank you. The men trudged the short path to Doran's cottage, snow crunching beneath their boots. Smoke billowed from the chimney, and the comforting scent of burnt peat clung to the air. Inside, Maria, Doran's wife, sat by the hearth, carefully darning a worn tunic. Elsa and Nina giggled as they danced their straw dolls across the wooden floor. The room was warm, lived in, yet heavy with the weight of a hard season. Doran pushed open the door. "Did he come this way?" he asked immediately. Maria looked up, startled. "Who?" "The Lord," Oliver said. "Lord Gryffindor, the man from the mill." At this, Elsa sprang up, her straw doll falling forgotten to the floor. "He woke up," she declared proudly. "He talked to me and Nina. Said he was going to rest again, but then he went outside. I thought he was just getting air." Doran's mouth tightened. "When?" "Morning," Nina offered softly. "Before we ate." Oliver sighed, eyes darkening. "That means he's been gone all day. Could be leagues away by now." Maria set the tunic aside. "So, he's run off." Neither man answered. The silence said enough. They sat for a time, by the fire, the warmth doing little to thaw the growing bitterness in their hearts. Doran poked the fire. "We thought he might reward us," Maria. "Thought maybe he was nobility, or a knight, or at least someone with coin." Maria raised an eyebrow. "And even if he was, what makes you think a man like that would share his riches with small folk like us?" Doran didn't answer. Neither did Oliver. They sat in silence again, while Elsa and Nina returned to their dolls, the fantasy of castles and knights turning quietly sour. Outside, the wind howled softly over the snow-covered hills, and the world seemed colder than ever before. The snow deepened with every step, and Harry's boots were soaked through, the edges crusted with frost. The wind howled in steady waves through the trees, brushing pine branches heavy with snow. What began as a confident magical hunt had turned into an exhausting, near-hopeless trudge through endless white. He had cast Point Me, Elk at least a dozen times, each time following the wand's subtle twitch of direction. And each time, the trail seemed to grow longer. He underestimated how far wild creatures would roam in these barren lands. Especially creatures as powerful and graceful as elks. Midday passed, then late afternoon, and Harry hadn't eaten since morning. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and his breath came in short, tired bursts as the cold sank deeper into his bones. The spells for warmth he had layered around himself were beginning to fray under exhaustion. Still, he pressed on, following the needle-point flicker of his wand toward the western ridge. Finally, just as the sun dipped behind the line of pines, and long shadows began to stretch across the snow, Harry found them. The clearing was a pocket of silence in the woods, ringed by snow-draped fir trees. The snow here was thinner, broken by hoofprints and crushed ice. And there, standing tall in the pale orange glow of the setting sun, was a bull elk, massive and majestic, with a crown of antlers like gnarled branches, its body thick and shaggy with winter fur. 2 does lingered nearby, nibbling at bark along the trees. Harry stood in silence, watching them. For a long moment, he forgot why he had come. The elks were breathtaking, wild and elegant, creatures untouched by the wars of men or the schemes of wizards. In that moment, he almost felt like an intruder. Then his stomach growled, painful and sharp. He remembered Oliver's thin face, Nina and Elsa's hopeful smiles, the coldness of the cottage, the hunger in the children's eyes. "I need food," Harry muttered, gripping his wand. He raised it. He thought of Stupefy, of Confringo, of Petrificus Totalis. All of them too unreliable, too slow, too uncertain. There was only one spell that guaranteed a clean, instant kill. His fingers trembled, not from cold, from hesitation. "A deer isn't a Death Eater," he whispered to himself, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. But he was a survivor. And in the north, sentiment was the luxury of the fed. He closed his eyes, then opened them. Avada Kedavra. A jet of green light burst from his wand. The sound was soft, like breath escaping lungs. The bull elk collapsed with a deep, slow groan. One of the does turned, startled, but Harry moved quickly, casting again, Avada Kedavra. and the second green jet struck true. The third one was already running, hooves tearing into snow, but Harry was faster. Another curse whispered, another flash of emerald. Silence returned to the woods. Harry lowered his wand slowly, chest heaving. He stared at the fallen bodies. The snow around them was unmarred, not a drop of blood. That was the curse's way, instant, painless, absolute. It was too quiet now. A knot tightened in his chest. He had used the unforgivable curse, not in war, not in battle, but to hunt. And not even for himself, but for strangers. Poor, kind strangers who had called him, my lord, and patched up his body and kept him warm. He exhaled slowly and whispered, thank you, to the fallen elks. His voice cracked in the air. Then he stepped forward and raised his wand once more. Reducio. The three massive elks shimmered, and then shrank until they were the size of satchels, easy to carry, ready to cook. He picked them up and tied them into a rope sling slung across his back. The forest had fallen into darkness, the trees now looming like silent sentinels beneath the moon. Harry had wandered deeper, seeking a place hidden and dry, far enough from the mill to work without being seen. Eventually, he found it, a narrow cave, half buried by snow and roots, but protected from the wind and wide enough for him to crouch and work. He placed the enchanted rope sling down gently, and the three elks returned to their full size with a flick of his wand. The air grew heavy with their presence, thick bodies steaming faintly in the cold, eyes glassy, limbs slack in death. For a moment, Harry just stood there, gazing down at what he had done. It was the first time he had killed without rage, without fear, without war. Just need, he sighed. All right then, let's do this right. Though he wasn't a butcher, he had read enough to know what came next. If the organs weren't removed, the meat would spoil quickly, and he had no idea how long he might need to live off this meat in this strange land. Kneeling beside the bull elk, he muttered, Defindo. The magic sliced through the belly with clean precision. A pungent smell filled the cave at once, bitter and unmistakable. Harry tried not to gag as he reached in, working clumsily to remove the organs one by one, intestines, stomach, the thick, veined liver. His hands trembled, and his breath clouded in the cold air, but he kept going, repeating the process with the first dough. When he was done, his arms ached, and his robes were stained with blood. But the bodies were lighter, and the risk of spoilage far lower. He wiped his hand on the snow, and took out his wand again. Cutis ex salvo. The skinning curse danced in green light, and the hide of the bull elk pulled away from the flesh with a disturbing slither. Harry flinched. There was something grotesque in it, but the spell was efficient. The pelt peeled off whole, falling to the cave floor with a dull slap. He stood still for a moment, breath coming hard, then whispered to himself, not all dark arts are evil, are they? The thought sat uneasily in his chest. Magic wasn't moral, not by itself. It was the wielder who shaped it. The two cleaned carcasses, the bull elk and the larger of the diz, were stored inside a deep compartment of his Gringot's trunk, wrapped in cold preservation charms. A flick of his wand locked the space, and he turned to the final dough, the one he is going to offer to the family. He already hacked off a large portion of flank and cut it into strips as best as he could. There was no seasoning, no oil, no cookware. Only raw meat, fire, and hunger. He conjured a magical flame in the center of the cave, setting it to hover just off the stone floor. The fire crackled with warmth, tinged blue and gold, and he placed the meat on a flat piece of rock balanced over it. The smell of charred meat soon filled the small cave. It burned quickly, the outside blackened while the inside remained pink, but Harry didn't care. His stomach groaned. He tore into the meat, chewing through the smoky, tough flesh with primal satisfaction. For the first time in days, he was warm. He was full. He was alive. Wrapped in the elk pelt, he leaned back against the wall, letting the fire's glow paint his face in amber. Somewhere outside, the wind howled across the white wilderness. But inside this cave Harry sat with blood-stained fingers, licking the grease from his lips. And as he stared into the fire, he whispered, I'll repay them. He would return to Oliver and Doran. With food, with gold, with thanks. But not yet. For now, he rested, and in the dancing firelight, the silence of the forest gave him something he hadn't felt in days. Peace. The morning frost had bitten less fiercely than before, but the cold still clung to the air like a warning. Harry stood at the mouth of the cave, the magical wards around it shimmering faintly as he removed them with a few silent gestures of his wand. One by one, the protections vanished, concealment, temperature barrier, sound silencing, until only bare winter remained. He adjusted the strap of his pack, tightened the belt at his waist where a leather pouch full of gold and silver coins hung heavily, and then turned toward the trail that would lead him back to the mill. Slung over his shoulder was the doe, massive, freshly cleaned but not skinned, its belly stitched with a quick sealing charm to hold the inside stable. Harry had thought of bringing more, but this one offering, he felt, would be enough. The journey was long. The snow crunched beneath his boots, the sun rose sluggishly behind a veil of cloud, and his breath came in white puffs. But his step was lighter than it had been in days. The meat from the night before had worked wonders on his strength, and each step now carried him with a steady, resolute energy. By midday, he crested a low hill, and there below it, nestled between skeletal trees and the edge of a frozen stream, stood the old stone mill. Smoke curled lazily from Doran's cottage chimney. A sense of warmth spread through Harry's chest. Homey, hopeful. He began descending the slope. Down below, Nina, the younger of the two girls, had been chasing a piece of rag that served as her doll's new blanket when her eyes lifted toward the hill. She froze, her small mouth falling open. Elsa, look, she shrieked, pointing frantically. The Lord is back. Both girls bolted from the snow-covered yard, hair bouncing under their fur-lined hoods. Their excited cries shattered the still air. My Lord Gryffindor. Harry smiled as they came racing up the path, small boots thudding, eyes wide as the great carcass swayed on his shoulder. It's so big, Elsa gasped, stopping just short of him. I've never seen a hunt like this, Nina whispered, staring in awe. You caught it all alone. I did, Harry said with a small grin, adjusting the weight of the doe. Moments later, the door to the cottage burst open and both Oliver and Doran came running, breath fogging, hands still holding half-peeled gloves. By the gods, Oliver muttered. My lord. Doran's voice trailed off as his eyes fixed on the doe, then on Harry, then on the children. You came back. Harry nodded and knelt down slightly, allowing the weight of the animal to shift forward. He flicked his hand behind his back, silently canceling the featherweight charm. With a dull, heavy thud, the full weight of the beast hit the ground, and both men staggered backward, blinking. You carried that? Doran asked, stepping up, gripping the leg experimentally. 7 hells, it weighs more than my workbench. Oliver let out a soft laugh of disbelief. Didn't even break a sweat. Before Harry could respond, a figure approached from the cottage, wiping her hands on her apron. Maria, Doran's wife, looked worn, tired from the kind of labor only a northern winter demanded of mothers and wives, but her eyes were clear and soft as they fell on the young man. She dropped a full, deep curtsy into the snow. We thank you, my lord, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Harry shifted uncomfortably. Please, he said. You don't have to bow. But she rose slowly, smiling with both gratitude and pride. You brought meat in winter, she said. And you gave my girls a reason to laugh again. I'll bow for that, my lord. Doran was already trying to drag the doe toward the mill's side wall, gesturing for Oliver to help. Harry reached down to untie the leather pouch from his belt. He held it out to Maria. There's gold in here, he said. More than enough to keep you warm, fed, and safe for few years. It's yours. I owe you all my life. But she looked at it as if it were on fire. My lord, we never expected. And yet, Harry interrupted, you saved me. You could have left me to freeze. I won't forget that. She took the pouch with trembling hands, blinking furiously. Elsa, Harry said, turning to the older girl, I think your father and uncle will need help butchering that thing. Want to be the first one to pick the best piece of meat? Her face lit up like a lantern, and she grabbed Nina's hand and squealed, yes, my lord. As the children ran off, Maria still stood holding the pouch of gold. Thank you, she said again, softly. Harry merely nodded, then turned to the others. Let's get the meat prepared, he said. It's time for everyone to eat. And for the first time since waking in the snow, Harry Potter, called Lord Gryffindor by strangers and children alike, felt useful. Not as a soldier, not as a savior, just a man with hands to work, and food to share. Chapter 8 The Dragon Awakens. The savory scent of roasted elk drifted across the clearing between the old mill and Doran's humble stone cottage. Smoke rose from the chimney in soft spirals, promising warmth and a full belly. Inside, the cottage was transformed. A rough wooden table stood adorned with whatever cloth Doran's wife, Maria, could find, and a modest spread of food was being prepared. Though the furnishings were plain, tonight the air brimmed with joy. Maria bustled around, setting down carved chunks of meat and boiled roots she had brought from the small marketplace. She had even managed to purchase a small bottle of honeyed wine, something she hadn't tasted in years. Her face, usually worn with care, was lit with a joy she hadn't felt in a long time. Doran raised a wooden mug filled with warm broth and smiled at Oliver, who sat beside him on a low bench. Across from them, Harry, still somewhat stiff from his journey, sat quietly but observant. "We haven't eaten like this since before the long frost," Oliver said, tearing into a piece of steaming meat. "The last stag we caught was near dead from the cold, and half rotten by the time we skinned it." Harry offered a faint smile. "I'm glad I could help. I couldn't have made it through the storm without you both." Maria, serving more stew into wooden bowls, gave a grateful nod. "It was no trouble, milord. And you've paid us more than kindly." Harry blinked at the honorific. "Please, don't call me, milord. I'm just, well, Harry. Just Harry." Oliver and Doran exchanged glances, then Doran chuckled. "Well, Lord Harry, we're still going to be grateful." Laughter broke out among them, even from the children. Elsa and Nina were curled near the fire, happily munching on dried fruit Maria had bought for them, their cheeks rosy and round. After a while, Harry leaned forward, his tone turning more serious. "I've been meaning to ask you both something. I don't know much about this land. About this land. Could you tell me more about the rulers here? The kingdoms?" Oliver scratched his beard. "You're not from here." "I traveled far," Harry replied carefully, not ready to reveal too much. "Very far." "Well," Doran began, "King Rhaegar Targaryen rules now. Took the throne after the old king, Aerys, passed. Not many mourned the Mad King, truth be told. He insulted too many lords and burned more bridges than he built. The Targaryens," Oliver said, "are dragonlords from Valyria. Or were. Some say the blood still flows in their veins, though no one's seen a real dragon since, well, forever. Rhaegar's not like his father though. Folks say he's calm, thoughtful." Harry listened intently, his brow furrowed. "And, where are we right now?" "You're in the north," Doran said. "The land of the Starks. Good folk, if a bit grim. We're a few days south of Winterfell, though only those with horses and coin visit there often." "And where is Valyria?" Harry asked. Oliver nodded slowly. "Across the sea. Valyria's long gone though. Burnt in some great doom, they say. Now it's just ruins and haunted ash. Essos has cities, Bravos, Pentos, Myr, but most of us'll never see 'em." Harry leaned back slightly, stunned. He had suspected something ever since hearing the names. But now, hearing them all together, Targaryen, Winterfell, Valyria, it finally clicked. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't his world. He hadn't traveled through time. He'd somehow crossed into an entirely different realm altogether. A different dimension, perhaps. And yet, thank the stars above, they spoke English. He exhaled deeply, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. He had left behind Hogwarts, Britain, everything he knew. And now, he was in a land of lords and kings, dragons and ancient magic. A place of honor, steel, and fire. Oliver noticed his silence. "You all right, Harry?" Harry nodded slowly. "Just adjusting." "Well," Doran said, raising his cup again, "wherever you came from, you're welcome here. You saved our lives, and gave us enough gold to last us years. With what you gave us, we can buy firewood, salt, wool, and grain. Maybe even fix the roof come spring." Oliver grinned. "I'll even get new boots that don't leak." Harry chuckled softly. "Glad I could help." As laughter returned to the room and the fire crackled bright, Harry felt a strange warmth settle in his chest. It wasn't home, but it wasn't hostile either. For now, that was enough. The sun broke gently over the snow-dusted hills as Harry stepped outside the mill, his breath curling in the frigid air. The warmth of the feast the night before still lingered in his bones, but his mind was abuzz with questions. This land, Westeros, as they called it, felt ancient, older than anything he'd known in his own world. It bore the texture of a forgotten legend, yet Harry could feel the faint shimmer of something more. Something magical. If there was magic in this world, he had to understand how it worked, how it differed from his own. He fastened his cloak and stepped out onto the narrow, beaten path that wound through the cluster of cottages nearby. It was a small village by any standard, barely 20 houses nestled close against the wilderness. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the scent of firewood and simmering broth drifted on the wind. Chickens clucked. Children played with sticks in the snow. Old women sat on stools spinning thread or mending wool. To Harry's surprise, the villagers greeted him warmly. They'd heard of Lord Gryffindor, the strange, quiet man who had appeared from the storm and gifted gold and meat to the poor. To them, he was not only a noble but a miracle. "Morning to you, milord," called a woman with a missing tooth and a basket of firewood on her hip. "Blessings upon your hearth, Lord Gryffindor," a wrinkled man with a crooked back murmured with a reverent nod. Harry returned the greetings awkwardly, still unused to the title. "Good morning, I'm, please, just Harry." He spent the day moving among them, asking questions with careful curiosity. When he asked about books, writing, or schools, they gave him puzzled looks. "Only them fancy maesters and lords know how to read," said one blacksmith, his hands calloused and scarred. "We got no use for letters. We live off the land, same as our fathers did. No education system, no reading or writing among the small folk." It reminded Harry of tales of his own country from centuries ago, before the invention of the printing press, before Hogwarts had even existed. So he turned the topic to magic. "Magic," said a shepherd with a crooked smile. "Ain't no magic left, milord. Just stories." But the stories came. An old woman with clouded eyes whispered of the cold ones, pale demons with eyes like blue fire that stole babies from cradles and froze the bones of men. Another told of the children of the forest, tiny people of leaf and root who spoke to trees and vanished like mist. One man swore that his grandfather had seen a dragon when he was a boy, a shadow that flew over the Dreadfort in silence. "It was as real as I am, I swear it on my life," the man said. "Wings like sails, teeth like swords. But they're gone now, all gone. They say the last ones died out when the Targaryens lost their hold," said another. "Magic's gone too, if it ever was real. Ain't no use dreamin' of it." Harry listened to each tale with the rapt attention of a scholar, piecing them together like fragments of an ancient tapestry. It soon became clear, magic had once touched this land, but it had faded. Like the wind erasing footprints in snow, the arcane had vanished from daily life. And yet, not entirely. That afternoon, he visited the old weirwood tree the villagers had spoken of, a solitary sentinel at the edge of the village, its white bark pale as bone and red leaves rustling in the wind like whispers of blood. A carved face peered out from its trunk, sorrowful, timeless. Harry stepped closer. He could feel something, not power, exactly, but presence. A subtle hum, a vibration in the air. It prickled his skin, tingled at his fingertips. Unlike the magic he wielded with his wand, this energy was old. It did not move or answer his will, but it watched. It endured. He pressed his palm gently to the bark, and something stirred inside him, an emotion he couldn't name. Reverence, perhaps, melancholy, hope. A piece of bark had fallen nearby, half buried in snow. He bent, picked it up, and tucked it carefully into his pouch. It might be useful, if not for spellwork, then for understanding. For memory. When he returned to the mill, the fire was already lit. Oliver was hammering at a loose board near the hearth, humming to himself. "You were gone long," Oliver said, straightening. Harry nodded, shedding his snow-flecked cloak. "I was just speaking with the villagers. Visiting the weirwood." Oliver nodded slowly. "Some say they talk, those trees. I can't hear a thing, but old Kess claims the one in Deepstream told her she'd outlive her husband." He chuckled. "She did, too. Do you mind," Harry asked cautiously, "if I stay here a little longer?" Oliver looked up, surprised. Then he smiled. "You're welcome as long as you like, Harry. You gave us a gift we can never repay. This mill's more a home now than it's been in years." Harry offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you." As night fell and snow thickened outside the mill windows, Harry sat near the fire, turning the weirwood bark over in his hands. Magic had not vanished, it had simply gone quiet. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had come to this world to wake it. The wind howled across the snow-covered fields as Harry sat beside the hearth, staring into the dancing flames. The warm light licked the walls of Oliver's mill, casting shifting shadows over old stones and stacked firewood. Yet despite the heat, Harry felt a chill coil in his chest, an unease he could no longer ignore. He reached into his pouch and pulled out the folded bark of the weirwood tree, rubbing it gently between his fingers as he thought. This world had no magic, not anymore. Its people feared and honored tales of sorcery and dragons like children fearing bedtime monsters. The last embers of power had long since turned to ash. And yet, he had arrived in this world on the wings of a dragon. A real one, not a story, not a memory, a creature of ancient fire and sky, one that breathed death with every wingbeat. Harry's jaw tightened. If the people of this world no longer possessed magic, then they had no hope of stopping such a creature, no spells, no enchanted blades, no protection. And what if the dragon had already caused harm? Burned a village, devoured livestock, struck terror into an already starving countryside? It would be his fault. His burden. He wouldn't, let that happen. He stood. The fire cracked behind him. The weirwood bark slipped back into his pouch. I have to find it, he murmured aloud, as though confirming it to himself. Before someone else gets hurt. The next morning, Harry left the mill at dawn. He didn't say goodbye. He knew Oliver or Doran would try to stop him, or at least insist on joining him, and Harry didn't want to risk their lives. This was a mission for a wizard. He walked swiftly, cutting across the frozen fields and into the woods beyond. The memory of the dragon's cave still lingered in his mind, a jagged hillcrest westward, near the place he had first awoken, half buried in snow. With each step, he cast his tracking spell again. Point me, dragon. The wand jerked slightly in his hand, tilting southwest. He followed. Hours passed. The trees grew denser, their black trunks etched with ice. Snow crunched beneath his boots, and the sky remained iron-gray above, as if watching. His breath misted in the air, and his hands were numb despite the warming charm he'd cast. And then, there it was. The hill rose before him, crowned with broken rock and ringed in shadow. A sharp wind cut across its face, but Harry could smell it now, scorched stone and ash. The memory of fire. He climbed, boots slipping, wand drawn. The mouth of the cave appeared like a wound in the hill, jagged, dark, and wide enough to swallow a wagon whole. Harry paused outside, heart pounding. He could feel the heat rising from within, faint but real. He pressed his hand to the rock. Lumos. The tip of his wand flared to life, casting white light across the interior. The cavern was massive. The walls shimmered with veins of obsidian and old scorch marks. And there, at the center, half-curled and breathing slowly, was the dragon. A shadow of terror and beauty. Its scales shimmered in pale white, its wings folded like crumpled sails, and its head rested on the curve of its tail. It looked bigger than the last time he saw it. Its body radiated heat. Its breaths came low and even. Asleep. Harry exhaled slowly. He could leave. He could walk away, seal the cave, and let the creature slumber until time buried it again. But what if it didn't stay asleep? What if hunger drove it to the villages? What if someone tried to fight it with spears and torches and children? No, he couldn't risk it. He lifted his wand, but even as he did, something stirred in the dragon. Its golden eye snapped open, locking on him. No fear, no anger, just curiosity, recognition. And in that gaze, Harry felt it again, that same strange pull, the same resonance that had drawn him to mount it once before. A flicker of understanding passed between them, as if the dragon knew him. And slowly, it rose. Not to charge, not to burn. To face him. Harry stood firm, wand still raised, unsure if he was about to fight, or forge something else entirely. Chapter 7. Between Love and the Crown. The bells of King's Landing tolled solemnly, not in mourning, but in coronation. Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King, had passed from the world. And now, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the realm's last hope for honor and stability, stood atop the Iron Throne. His coronation had been swift, almost too swift. The small council, though diminished and fractured by years of Aerys paranoia, had rallied behind him. No one else in Westeros had a stronger claim, and with Viserys still a boy, and no other branch of the Targaryen line to muddy the waters, there had been no need for bloodshed or rival banners. The great sept of Baelor was filled that day. Silent sisters stood along the walls, lords and ladies sat in stiff silence, and the High Septon himself placed the heavy crown upon Rhaegar's brow. Long live the king, they had said, voices echoing without passion. But now, seated alone within the Red Keep's solar, Rhaegar felt the true weight of rule settle across his shoulders, not the crown of beaten gold, but the invisible burden of legacy, betrayal, and ambition. He stood before a large map of Westeros, the parchment edges curled, the painted rivers and roads faded with age. Colored pins marked allies and enemies both. There were too many black pins now, where once there had been red. At the sound of quiet footsteps, Arthur Dayne entered, dressed in his white cloak, the sword of the morning polished but unsheathed. "You summoned me, your grace," Arthur said, voice measured. Rhaegar looked up. "Close the door, Arthur. I am no grace here." Arthur obeyed, stepping forward. "You wear the crown, Rhaegar. The world will call you king, whether you want it or not." Rhaegar exhaled deeply and leaned against the edge of the table. "I never wanted it like this," he muttered. I believed I could bring peace. A new order, not be cursed with the wreckage my father left behind." Arthur said nothing, but his presence was grounding. Steady. Rhaegar moved to a nearby chair and sat heavily. "Did you know," he continued, "that my father insulted Lord Tully to his face at court? Called him a trout with a worm in his mouth. Sent him off red-faced. And Lord Tyrell, publicly accused of plotting sedition because a gardener gifted him a rose." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "That explains why half of the Reach did not send word after your ascension." "Indeed." Rhaegar's tone darkened. "And Lord Jon Arryn, denied a court seat after decades of loyalty. House Royce offended by being named lesser men in a drunken feast. House Martell only remains loyal because of Elia, and even she grows colder by the day." "You speak of alliances, Rhaegar," Arthur said carefully. "But this is not only about old grievances, is it?" Rhaegar looked up, met his friend's eyes. "No," he admitted, "it's about Lyanna." Arthur said nothing. The silence between them was long and heavy. "I love her," Rhaegar confessed at last. "And she loves me, I know it, but if I bring her to court now, if I cast Elia aside, then I lose Dorne. And Robert Baratheon will turn the Stormlands against me without hesitation. I may hold the Iron Throne, but I will have no foundation beneath it." "Then you cannot have both," Arthur said gently. "Not Elia and Lyanna, not peace and love, you must choose." Rhaegar's hands tightened into fists. "Must I?" he whispered. "I am the king. The gods placed me here. Why must I sacrifice what little happiness I have for the sake of men who would spit on the crown as soon as it suited them?" Arthur did not respond. He understood. He had seen the glint in Rhaegar's eyes when he spoke of Lyanna Stark. It was not lust, it was not infatuation, it was belief, destiny. "And yet, you are not Aegon the Conqueror," Arthur finally said. "You cannot take 2 wives and expect the realm to smile upon it. You will be seen as no better than your father." That struck deep. Rhaegar turned his face away. "Elia deserves more," he said. "She has been nothing but gracious. But she is so often ill. So frail. We have a son, Aegon, but—" He trailed off. "But he is not Lyanna's son," Arthur finished for him. Rhaegar stood again, began pacing. "If I ask for her hand, I dishonor Robert. If I keep her hidden, I insult Lyanna. If I do nothing, I may lose both." A knock interrupted them. A servant entered, bowing low. "Your Grace, your good brother has come from Sunspear. Princess Elia requests an audience at once." Rhaegar's expression faltered. "Of course she does," he muttered, already knowing what it was about. He turned to Arthur. "Send word to the council. We must prepare a feast. Dorne must be reminded that their blood still runs through our future king." Arthur bowed. "And Lyanna?" Rhaegar's eyes darkened. "She must remain hidden. For now. Until I am strong enough to protect her. Until I am strong enough to defy them all." Arthur nodded slowly, though he did not look pleased. The prince, now king, walked to the balcony, overlooking the glittering roofs of King's Landing. Far below, life carried on. Merchants shouted in the square. Bells rang from distant towers. The city did not yet burn. But in his heart, Rhaegar could already feel the fire. The golden sun had long since dipped beyond the horizon, and the halls of the Red Keep glowed with the amber light of countless torches. Rhaegar Targaryen walked with purpose through the corridors of his family's ancestral seat, his boots echoing softly upon the stone. There were still whispers in the court, whispers of Harrenhal, of flowers, of stark wolves, but he paid them no mind. Not tonight. He stepped into the Queen's Solar, where voices met him, soft, gentle, full of laughter. Ashara Dane sat cross-legged on the floor, her lavender eyes crinkling as she listened to Princess Rhaenys, who animatedly described her latest imaginary adventure, dragons and dolls, thrones and lions. On the other side of the room, Prince Aegon, still wrapped in Dornish silks, cooed in the arms of a Baron Martell. Elia looked up from her embroidery and smiled faintly. "You're early." But the warmth died instantly. A Baron Martell, the Red Viper of Dorne, lowered Aegon to the plush rug with all the grace of a father placing his own son down. Then, in a flash, like a striking serpent, he was across the room. The blade, curved, sharp, wickedly thin, was at Rhaegar's throat before the Kingsguard had even registered the movement. "Do not move," Arthur Dayne barked, stepping forward instinctively, but one look at the knife's angle made him freeze. Elia gasped, "A baron, no." She stood, eyes wide with fury and fear. "Are you mad?" "I've been mad for a long time," a baron snarled, eyes locked on Rhaegar. "I wanted to do this the day you shamed my sister in front of the realm, when you placed that damned crown on Lyanna Stark's head." His voice was shaking with rage. Ashara stood slowly, moving to her brother's side. "A baron. Don't," he snapped. "Don't you defend him, not now." The air was still. The Kingsguard edged closer, but Arthur Dayne raised a hand, warning them off. "A baron," he said calmly. "If you spill royal blood, you doom yourself. Let him speak, please." Rhaegar stood unmoving, the Valyrian steel of the dagger kissing his pale neck. His violet eyes met a baron's without flinching. "Let me speak," he said softly. "And if, after I speak, you still wish to kill me, then I won't stop you." A baron's jaw clenched. "Speak then, quickly." Everyone in the room fell silent, even little Rhaenys, who clung to Ashara's skirts. "You know the tale of the Knight of the Laughing Tree," Rhaegar began. "An unknown knight who enhorsed 3 others at the tourney of Harrenhal. A mystery that enraged my father." "Everyone knows it," a baron snapped. Rhaegar nodded. "But no one knows who the knight was. Except me." The knife did not waver. "It was Lyanna Stark," Rhaegar said. A gasp escaped from Elia. Ashara's eyes widened. She saw squires mocking her bannermen, smaller, weaker men who served the North with pride. And she could not bear it. So she donned armor, stole a horse, and entered the lists as a mystery knight. She fought like no lady ever should have been allowed to, and she won. 3 tilts, 3 knights humbled, all for honor. He paused. "My father saw danger in everything. When the knight would not remove their helm, he declared them a traitor. An assassin. He sent men to hunt the knight down." "Did they find her?" Ashara whispered. Rhaegar shook his head. "No, I found her first." She was frightened. Her brothers did not know. She would have been executed if caught. "I helped her escape Harrenhal." A baron's eyes burned with confusion. "Then why the crown?" "Because," Rhaegar said, "I was moved. Not by desire, but by admiration. She was brave, bold, and foolish. Like the old heroes in songs. When I named her the Queen of Love and Beauty, it was not for love, it was to honor the knight that no one would ever know. To remember her courage in a world that would never allow it." A baron's grip on the knife trembled. "I knew what it looked like," Rhaegar admitted. "But I did not expect the court to twist it. I did not expect my father's paranoia to spiral out of control. And I never meant to shame Elia." The words were heavy, honest, and perhaps not entirely true, for the unspoken pieces still lingered in his mind. But some truths were not meant for others. For a long moment, the knife remained. And then a baron slowly pulled it away. He stepped back, breathing hard. "I still don't like you," he growled. "But if that's the truth, then I owe my sister peace." Elia approached quietly, reaching for Rhaegar's hand. "Is it true?" she asked, softly, tears in her eyes. "You did it for honor." Rhaegar nodded. "Yes." And for the first time in weeks, Elia smiled, a small, trembling smile, but real. "I hated you," she whispered. "For a while. But I'm glad you told me." Rhaegar touched her cheek. "I never stopped caring for you, Elia." Ashara exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. Arthur relaxed visibly. A baron turned, picking up baby Aegon and tossing him gently into the air, making the child laugh. "Well," he muttered, "it's still not how I would have handled it. But I suppose stabbing kings isn't in fashion anymore." Arthur smirked. "Not unless you want to lose your head." Rhaegar said nothing more. He looked at the family gathered before him, flawed, broken, but still together. For now. And somewhere in the north, a wolf was still waiting. The candlelight flickered gently within the narrow chamber, deep within the Red Keep, an ancient, hidden room only passed down from king to heir, father to son. Stone walls closed in tightly around Rhaegar Targaryen, sealing him away from the world, from judgment, from duty, if only for a while. A quill scratched lightly across parchment. He wrote in silence, cloaked in midnight and crowned in loneliness. The heavy robe of kingship lay discarded on the arm of his chair, replaced by the looser, simpler attire he had always preferred. His fingers trembled slightly as he penned the words, not from fear, but longing. "My dearest heart, the crown has settled upon my brow like a chain, cold and heavy. The bells of my coronation rang loud across King's Landing, but none of them reached my soul, not the cheers of the lords, not the promises of the banners. Only your name echoes there. I miss you, Lyanna. I long for the sound of your laughter in the frostbitten wind, for the stubborn fire in your eyes when you speak of honor. You are far from me in miles, but not a day passes that I do not feel your spirit beside mine. Wait for me, Wolf of the North. I will come to you. Soon. Rhaegar paused, his hand tightening around the quill. How could he speak of soon, when every step toward her was through a swamp of blood and betrayal? His eyes lingered on the flame before him, wavering like his resolve. He dipped the quill again and wrote with firmer hand. My mind is torn, my love. The path to you is steep, and at its summit stands a question I cannot yet answer. I am bound to a queen, a good woman. Elia has never wronged me. She smiles at me still, plays with our children beneath the shade of Dornish tapestries. And yet, I see her not as wife, but as shadow. You are my sun, Lyanna. My dawn and dusk, the harp in my dreams. If I must break my vows, I will. If I must forsake the Martells, the realm, and all they built to keep their house strong, I will do so. If I must shatter the peace of two kingdoms to claim you, then let the world burn in dragonfire. And if Elia stands in my way. He hesitated, his breath caught. He set the quill down and ran a hand through his silver-gold hair. His reflection stared back at him from a silvered shield hung in the stone wall. Not the man of songs. Not the noble prince of prophecy. Just a weary figure draped in quiet madness. Could he do it? Could he kill an innocent woman, his wife, the mother of his children, for love? He stood slowly, walked across the room, and drew back the heavy velvet curtain that covered the only narrow window slit. Moonlight poured in, cold and silver. Below, in the courtyard, he saw her. Elia. She was carrying Aegon in her arms, his chubby fingers gripping her braid, while Rhaenys chased them in circles, laughter spilling into the night. For a long moment, Rhaegar said nothing. He simply stared. Then he turned away. He returned to the table, folded the letter, and pressed his seal to the parchment, a dragon and a harp intertwined. We will be together, Lyanna. One way or another. He tucked the letter into a hidden drawer behind the bricks, where only he could retrieve it later for delivery. And in the stillness of the secret room, Rhaegar Targaryen, king of the Andals and the First Men, sat in silence, torn between the crown upon his head and the ghost who haunted his heart. Chapter 9 Forging Fire and Ice. The air in the cave was crisp with the scent of snow and smoke, and Harry stood just beyond the glow of his enchanted fire, watching the dragon with a mixture of awe and quiet reflection. Its enormous white body was curled into a half-moon around the warmest part of the cavern. Once marred by deep, angry scars from its imprisonment beneath Gringotts, the dragon's wounds had begun to heal. The gashes across its scales were no longer crusted in dried blood, and new, silvery hide was slowly covering the worst of them. Harry couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Winter was healing, and he had helped. Winter. That was the name Harry had given the dragon, named not just for the color of its glistening scales, but also for the world they now inhabited, cold, vast, and utterly foreign. The dragon opened one of its gleaming eyes as Harry approached, and with an almost comical gentleness, lowered its massive head. Harry reached out, scratching behind one of the bony ridges above its eye. The dragon gave a low, rumbling purr, the sound reverberating through the stone floor. I suppose you're the only one left that knows where I came from, Harry murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. You're my last link to that world. Maybe that's why the bond had formed so strongly between them. It reminded Harry of Hedwig, the silent companionship, the trust formed without words. But Winter was more than a pet. This was a creature of myth, of flame and flight. It belonged to the very blood and bone of this world, a world that once worshipped dragons. Oliver and Doran had told him of the dragonlords who once ruled Westeros, of the mighty Targaryens who rode fire-breathing beasts into battle and carved an empire from the sky. Some dragons, they claimed, were so massive they could swallow an elephant whole. Harry had no desire to conquer kingdoms, but flying, that was something he missed with all his heart. Flying was freedom, and now, with no broomstick and no knowledge of how to craft one, Winter might be his only path to the skies. There was just one problem. Harry paced around the dragon's enormous back, examining the jagged, brutal spikes that rose from its spine. The ridges were uneven and sharp, perfect natural armor, but terrible for a rider. A normal saddle would never fit, and worse, trying to ride bareback would be a death sentence. Winter turned its head to watch him, golden eyes curious and calm. Harry gave a rueful smile. I know. I can't just sit on you like I did with Buckbeak. He returned to the corner of the cave where he had set up a makeshift study, piles of old magical books from the Black family vault, parchments scrawled with notes, and enchanted candles that burned without flame. After several hours of reading through obscure and often contradictory spellwork, one passage in a weathered leather-bound tome caught his attention. The spell was originally used for spatial manipulation, often for storing large or misshapen objects discreetly, like trunks with vast interiors or secret chambers hidden beneath floors. But with some creative modifications, it could be used to construct something unique, a pocket dimension saddle. If done correctly, the magic would create a pocket of space that wrapped around Winter's spine, nullifying the spikes and creating a smooth, solid surface for Harry to sit on. The spikes would still be there, untouched and unharmed, but inside the pocket they would phase out of the way. It would allow Harry to sit safely on the dragon's back without discomfort for either of them. The idea was ambitious. The crafting took 2 more days. Harry used the basilisk hide bindings, enchanted iron buckles, and thread laced with unicorn hair from an old cloak Sirius had gifted him. He cast spell after spell, whispering incantations in the flickering firelight. Winter remained still the entire time, as though sensing the importance of Harry's work. Finally, when the saddle was secured and the pocket space activated, Harry climbed up carefully. The saddle adjusted itself perfectly, the magic humming softly in his ears. Winter huffed a plume of frosty breath and gave a low, eager rumble. You want to fly, don't you? Harry said, smiling as his heart beat faster. All right then, boy, let's fly. They didn't take off that night. Harry wanted to make sure the enchantments would hold. But as he camped beside Winter in the cave, sharing cooked elk meat from the stockpile in his trunk, he felt a peace he hadn't known in weeks. He hadn't gone back to Oliver's mill or Doran's cottage. They would understand. This cave, this dragon, this was his new haven. And soon, when he took to the skies, he would see what this world looked like from above. And perhaps, find where he truly belonged in it. Harry spent most mornings buried in parchment and faded ink, the yellow glow of enchanted firelight casting shadows across the cavern walls. The chill of the cave didn't bother him, not with Winter curled nearby, his heavy breaths warming the air like a gentle hearth. He pored over ancient grimoires from the Black family vault, cross-referencing spell theory, magical constructs, and obscure enchantments. Every spell he mastered, every rune he deciphered, was another step in adapting to this world, a world where magic had grown quiet, where dragons were legend, and where his very presence could shift the balance. But it wasn't the dusty old books or the long hours of reading that filled Harry's soul with fire. It was the nights. When the moon was high and the sky clear, he would climb onto Winter's back, gripping the enchanted saddle just behind one of the dragon's massive white spines. The moment he gave the word, Winter would bound forward, and with a tremendous surge, they would soar into the heavens. The cold wind screamed past him, tearing at his cloak and ruffling his hair, but Harry only laughed, eyes shining with exhilaration. No broomstick, no matter how fast, could match the speed and majesty of riding a dragon. The stars above seemed close enough to touch, and the world below spread out in frozen wonder. Winter flew like a streak of starlight, his massive wings whispering power with every beat. Still, for all the joy it brought him, Harry kept their secret flight sacred. He had learned enough from Oliver and Doran to understand the danger. The ruling family, Targaryens, had once been dragonlords. If they discovered that a dragon still lived, and worse, that someone else had bonded with it, they might stop at nothing to claim it. Harry had no intention of giving Winter up. So, they flew only at night, always high above the clouds, far from watchful eyes. It began as a curiosity, flying to new places, seeing the lands he'd only heard about through tales whispered beside cottage hearths. But it quickly grew into something more. One night, they flew to the coast, and Harry caught his first glimpse of White Harbor, the jewel of the north. With its stone walls, tall towers, and bustling docks lit by firelight, it shimmered like a dream on the edge of the frozen sea. Winter landed in the woods several miles from the city and vanished into the trees. Harry made the rest of the journey on foot, dressed in warm northern garb, a pouch of gold tucked in his belt. In White Harbor, he introduced himself as Lord Gryffindor, a name that earned respect and curiosity in equal measure. The people here had never heard of House Gryffindor, but that only made him more intriguing. His quiet confidence, noble bearing, and bottomless coin purse sealed the image. He was a traveling lord, eccentric in private, but generous with his gold. By day, Harry explored. He visited markets and dockyards, smithies and bookstores. He asked questions, carefully and kindly, about politics, magic, history. He learned the rhythms of northern life, the strength of its people, the pride they held in their ancient bloodlines. Every evening, as twilight fell, Harry would walk into the wilderness, and without fail, winter would find him, silent as snowfall. Then they would fly to a new destination. Barrowton, Torrance Square, even as far as the edges of Last Hearth, Harry visited them all. And with each place, he collected. His enchanted trunk became a treasure trove: sacks of barley and flour, crates of smoked fish, bundles of dried herbs and spices, barrels of salt and oil. He gathered steel blades and chainmail from smiths who boasted Valyrian techniques, purchased wool cloaks and leather boots made to weather the cold. Nothing was beyond his reach, and no one questioned a rich lord with generous hands. In truth, he could have lived lavishly. But Harry didn't want luxury, he wanted preparation. He was building something. He didn't know what yet, only that the world was vast and uncertain, and he needed to be ready. Each time he returned to the cave, he added new supplies to the organized chambers of his trunk. Winter would curl nearby, gnawing lazily on an elk leg, watching his human companion with quiet interest. One night, as they soared above the snow-blanketed fields, Harry leaned low over Winter's back and whispered, "We're not just surviving anymore, are we, boy?" The dragon rumbled in agreement, white scales glinting in the starlight. They were more than survivors now. They were explorers. Builders. And somewhere deep in Harry's heart, something else stirred, an old feeling from another life. Hope. The wind rustled through the bone-white branches of the weirwood tree, its ancient face carved in another age, its red sap tears trailing slowly down its bark. Beneath its shadow, Harry stood barefoot, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his wand clenched in one hand and a ceremonial blade in the other. The cold soil of the north bit at his skin, but he welcomed the chill. It reminded him he was alive, and that magic, though faded in this world, still pulsed in its hidden veins. From the ancient tomes of the Black family, Harry had uncovered what the Ministry would have labeled forbidden magic: rituals of blood, rites of transformation, spells that strengthened the body and sharpened the mind. Back in his own world, such things would be locked away, considered too dangerous, too dark. But here, in a realm without regulation or oversight, he was free. And he chose to act. A small stone altar sat at the base of the tree, etched with runes Harry had traced by hand. Fresh blood from a deer glistened on the stone, his offering. Winter, his dragon, watched from a distance, his pale wings curled around him like a cloak. He had offered a few drops of his blood willingly, nuzzling Harry before retreating. Dragon blood, one of the rarest magical components known. And now, mixed with Harry's own in the grooves of the ritual circle. With words half-whispered in Latin and magic drawn from the ancient books, Harry began the rite. The pain hit him like fire, raw, searing, primal. His veins burned as the magic took hold, crawling through his body like living flame. His muscles twitched, his heart thundered, and his bones ached as they strengthened. When it ended, he collapsed to the earth, soaked in sweat and blood, his body steaming in the morning frost. And when he opened his eyes again, he saw clearly. No blur, no need for glasses. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter saw the world as it was, sharp, vivid, and impossibly real. The next day, in White Harbor, Harry set his plans into motion. He found a grizzled knight, old, weathered, with scars crisscrossing his arms and a broken nose that had never healed properly. The man called himself Esser Harwin the Red, once a hedge knight of no renown, now teaching swordplay to rich brats for coin. "You want to learn to fight, boy?" Esser Harwin grunted as he studied Harry's posture. "Most lords don't like getting their hands dirty." "I'm not most lords," Harry replied, tossing the man a purse heavy with silver. "I'll pay you double if you make me sweat." Esser Harwin snorted. I like you already." They trained in the mornings behind an old stable. Harry learned quickly. His newly enhanced reflexes gave him an edge, though Harwin never went easy on him. "Footwork, Gryffindor," the knight bellowed. "If your feet ain't planted right, you're dead before the blade even swings." And Harry listened. Every lesson, every bruise, every blister hardened him. His movements became quicker, his stance more confident. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about understanding power in this world. A wand wouldn't always protect him. Alongside his sword lessons, Harry took to horseback with a vengeance. He had already purchased several strong northern horses, stallions and mares bred for the cold. He kept them in his trunk, shrunken with precision, each with their own name and gear. But riding a horse was more than owning one. So, with Sir Harwin beside him, he rode through the snow-dusted forests and rolling fields. He learned balance, control, how to read a horse's breathing and listen to its rhythm. His preferred mount was a black mare he named Shade, swift and silent. One evening, after a long ride, they camped near a frozen stream. Harwin was skinning a rabbit while Harry watched the stars. "You ride like a man born to it now," Harwin muttered, glancing over. "And your sword arm's comin' along. You got something in your blood, Gryffindor. Fire, maybe." Harry smiled slightly. Maybe. But Harry had one more reason for this journey. He was heading north, past villages and forests, up into the realm of eternal cold. To Castle Black, to the Wall. The ancient wall, soaring, mythic, carved from magic and ice. The moment Harry had heard of it, he knew he had to see it with his own eyes. It wasn't just curiosity, it was calling to him. There was magic in that place. Magic of the old world. And if it still lingered, Harry wanted to understand it. To study it. Winter remained far behind, hidden in a glacial crevasse in the Frostfangs, responding to Harry through their growing mental link when needed. The dragon didn't protest being left alone. In truth, he understood. Harry needed to walk this road with his own 2 feet. So with Shade beneath him and Sir Harwin by his side, Harry Gryffindor rode north, toward the Great Wall of Ice, toward secrets older than any book, and toward a destiny no wand could have foreseen. Chapter 10 Echoes of the Marauders. The wall loomed before him, stretching endlessly across the horizon like a frozen mountain range carved by giants. From a distance, Harry had thought he understood its scale. After all, he had seen it from the sky atop Winter's back. But now, standing at its base, the truth of it hit him like cold steel. It was not just tall. It was colossal. The sheer breadth of the wall made his neck ache as he craned upward, watching the icy surface shimmer in the pale northern light. It stretched into the clouds and beyond his comprehension, an ancient monument of magic, frost, and time. Castle Black stood in its shadow, stark and functional, a gathering of timber buildings and black stone rising from the permafrost-like bones from the earth. Crows walked its courtyards, some young, some old, all wearing the black cloak of the Night's Watch. Their eyes followed him with curiosity, but none approached. Strangers were rare here. Harry dismounted Shade and led her through the gates, nodding respectfully to the guards. He requested an audience with the Lord Commander, and after only a few moments, a gruff man with wind-burned cheeks and steel-gray eyes appeared at the keep's door. "You must be Lord Gryffindor," the man said, extending a gloved hand. "Gerald Fisher, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. We were expecting you." "You were?" Harry raised a brow, shaking his hand firmly. "The Maester received a raven. Someone down south, White Harbor, I presume, wrote ahead. Said you were a scholar. Interested in the wall." "I'm many things," Harry said with a slight smile. "But yes, I came to learn." Lord Fisher nodded and gestured toward the tower. "Then let's get you warm. The wind bites deeper than a sword up here." Inside, the stone halls were lit with flickering torches and the scent of wood smoke clung to every corner. They settled beside a hearth where a meager fire crackled. Fisher poured 2 cups of hot mead and sat heavily in a chair opposite Harry. "So," Fisher began, "you want to know about the wall?" "I want to know about what lies beyond it," Harry said. "What it was built for. How it was built." Fisher exhaled through his nose. "You'll want to speak with Maester Emmon. He's blind, but there's no sharper mind in all the 7 kingdoms. He'll tell you stories that'll make your blood freeze colder than the wall." He paused, studying Harry carefully. "You're not like the usual high-born lads we see. You've got the look of someone who's seen stranger things than this wall." Harry only nodded. More than once, Fisher didn't press. He only rose and gestured for Harry to follow. They entered a quiet chamber, warmed by a larger fire. An old man sat beneath a heavy blanket, skin thin as parchment and eyes white with blindness. Yet his face bore wisdom that time could not erase. "Emmon," Fisher said softly, "you've a guest." "Ah, I heard the steps," the old man replied with a faint smile. "Come closer, young man. Let me look upon you with my ears." "I'm called Harry," he said, stepping forward. "Lord Gryffindor, by title." "Gryffindor," Emmon repeated, tasting the word. "A noble name. You're not from the south, are you? No, Harry replied. Farther than that, another kingdom, perhaps. Emmon chuckled. I once dreamed of other kingdoms, of places where dragons still soared and the dead stayed buried. Perhaps your tale is not as mad as it sounds. A younger man entered behind them, a scribe, perhaps no older than 20, with bright eyes and a soft-spoken manner. Maester Emmon, he said, shall I read to our guest? Please do, Emmon said. The volumes on the long night. The ones I marked. The young man retrieved a heavy tome from the shelf and began to read aloud. Harry listened intently as the voice carried through the chamber. In the age of the first men, before the 7 kingdoms, there came a darkness that swallowed the sun and froze the world. From beyond the Frostfangs, the others came, creatures of death and cold, who raised the dead to serve them. They marched on the realms of men, leaving ruin in their wake. As the words poured forth, Harry felt something stir deep inside, a familiarity. A sense of dread and purpose. This wasn't just legend. He had fought such creatures before, dementors, wraiths, shades conjured by death and hate. And here, in this world, those stories had taken flesh. They built the wall with magic, Emmon said when the reading paused. Not just stone and ice. The children of the forest and the first men worked together, binding spells into its foundation, wards of old power, forgotten by most. Can anyone still use that magic? Harry asked. None here, Emmon replied, his voice tinged with sorrow. The blood has thinned, the knowledge lost. Harry leaned back, staring into the flames. Maybe not all is lost. Outside, the wind howled against the stone, as if in answer. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, slanted shadows over the yard of Castle Black, when the old knight stepped forward beneath the boughs of the weirwood tree. The red leaves rustled in the chill wind, and its face, carved long ago, looked down with ancient solemnity. The gathered men stood in respectful silence as Esser Harwin, the grizzled knight with silver-streaked hair and weathered armor, knelt before the godswood. Harry stood among the Black brothers, arms crossed, watching with quiet reverence. He'd seen many ceremonies in his life, but none like this. There was no pomp, no noble banners or trumpets. Only firelight, snow underfoot, and the presence of something old and sacred. The Lord Commander stepped forward with a cup of wine and an oath scroll. Esser Harwin of House Pharaoh, he said, his voice grave, do you swear your life and honor to the Night's Watch, to take no wife, hold no lands, father no children? I do, Harwin answered, his voice strong despite the age in his bones. Do you swear to wear the black until your death, to stand as a shield against the darkness beyond the wall? I do, he repeated. Then rise, Brother Harwin. You have no family now but us. As Harwin rose, the Black brothers stepped forward one by one, laying hands on his shoulder, welcoming him into their ranks. A quiet strength passed among them, no great celebration, but a solemn binding. Harry felt a strange pride watching it, understanding that the man who had once taught him to swing a sword now belonged to something greater than himself. Later that evening, as the sun dipped beyond the western sky, Harry was given a tour of Castle Black by a soft-spoken steward named Jonnik. The castle's cold bones came alive with stories, the rookery, where ravens nested like shadows, the armory, with its rows of dull, functional weapons, and finally, the pulley system that rose alongside the wall like a wooden spine, groaning with each ascent. Brandon the Builder designed this, Jonnik explained as they stared up at the towering lift, which clanked slowly down from the heights. Said he wanted to make the wall climbable for those who couldn't fly. Harry raised an eyebrow. Fly, Jonnik chuckled. Aye, legend says Brandon built it with the children of the forest, and that once, long ago, dragons flew beyond the wall. But that's just stories. Harry smiled, his thoughts drifting to winter, waiting patiently in the wilderness beyond. As the tour ended, Maester Emmon surprised Harry with an invitation. The old man had taken a keen interest in him during their talks. There's a place we rarely show visitors, Emmon said, his voice frail but filled with purpose. Come, I think you should see it. They moved slowly, guided by Jonnik, through a narrow passage behind the rookery tower. The stone here was older, more worn, carved before the wall had truly taken form. At the end of the hall was a wooden door, ironbound and marked with faded runes. This was where Brandon the Builder worked, Jonnik whispered. Some say he slept here. It's the oldest room in Castle Black. Inside, it was cold and quiet, the only light coming from a single torch. The room was bare except for a stone slab near the back wall and a long, etched surface covered in intricate symbols, stonework that looked nothing like the rest of the castle. The moment Harry stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. The markings weren't Old Tongue. They weren't Valyrian. They were unmistakably English. Etched deep into the stone, untouched by time, were the words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Harry froze. His heart thudded in his chest as he knelt beside the wall, tracing the familiar sentence with his fingertips. Beneath it, 3 more inscriptions were carved, smaller but unmistakable. Prongs, Padfoot, Mooney. A stunned silence stretched in the room. Jonnik, who had been explaining the mysterious carvings, paused. "No one's ever made sense of it. Most say Brandon must have gone mad in his final days, writing gibberish." But Harry couldn't hear him. The torchlight danced over the letters, and his mind reeled. It's impossible, but there it was. A marauder's joke, written in a world that should never have known it. And Brandon the Builder, who had helped construct this magical wall, had somehow known the words of the marauder's map. "It's English," Harry murmured. "What was that?" asked Jonnik. Harry looked up, swallowing hard. "It's not gibberish. I can read it." Maester Emmon tilted his head. "What does it say?" Harry hesitated. Then, with a dry laugh, he recited, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The echo of those old words, spoken in a new world, made his chest tighten. He felt it in his bones, the pull of fate, the sense that something, or someone, had guided him here. That this wasn't just chance. And for the first time since he'd arrived in Westeros, Harry felt something more than awe, more than curiosity. He felt purpose. The chamber was quiet, only the low flicker of the torch casting dancing shadows across the ancient stonework. Harry remained frozen, still kneeling before the wall that bore a message from a man long lost to time and memory. A message from his godfather. Emmon whispered, voice thick with disbelief. No one could read those words before. Not in all the years I've served here. Harry stood slowly, his fingers still resting against the letters, prongs. Padfoot, Mooney. His voice was hoarse, because it's in English, my language, my world's language. Emmon turned toward the sound of his voice. And you, are not of this world, are you? Harry hesitated. The secret he had guarded since his arrival now seemed like a fragile thing, as if the stones themselves had whispered it to the old maester. No, I'm not. I didn't come here by choice, and I thought I was the only one. Emmon nodded slowly, his mind racing even in his old age. So you believe that Brandon Stark was from your world as well? I don't believe it, I know it. Harry's voice cracked with emotion. Brandon Stark or Sirius Black was my godfather. He vanished in front of me, fell through a magical arch during a battle. Everyone thought he died. I never knew where he went. But this, he gestured at the wall, this proves he came here. Emmon's wrinkled brow furrowed, but these carvings are ancient. Brandon the Builder lived 8,000 years ago. These stones have not been altered in living memory. Harry swallowed hard. Then Sirius didn't just come to this world. He came to its past. A heavy silence followed as that truth settled between them like dust on ancient stone. Then there's no hope of finding him? Emmon asked gently. No, Harry said, voice heavy with grief. If Sirius lived that long ago, he's gone. But he didn't forget me. He carved my name here. Harry Potter. He turned and pointed at another stone slab, its letters pristine despite their age. He remembered me, even after all that time. Emmon was silent for a long while, then murmured, that is the kind of love that defies time itself. Harry turned away, his throat tight, his hands clenched at his sides. He was always more than just a guardian. He was family, my father's best friend, my protector. He exhaled slowly, tears stinging his eyes. And now I know, even when he was alone in a strange world, he never stopped thinking of me. Emmon slowly stood, leaning on his assistant's arm. Come with me, Harry. There's more. They passed through a narrow corridor, another ancient part of Castle Black, and entered a vault room filled with crumbling stone inscriptions. The air was cool and still. The torchlight danced across symbols Harry recognized instantly. Not just words, but phrases he'd spoken in the past. Lines from Remus's stories, doodles of antlers, even a crudely drawn dog paw. And at the very back, etched deep into the largest wall, was another message. Mischief managed. Beneath it, in bold letters, as though it were meant to last forever. Marauders. Harry staggered backward as if struck. His knees buckled, and he sank to the cold stone floor. The words blurred before his eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. I thought he was gone forever, Harry whispered. But he left this, like a trail of stars. Emmon placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. You are not alone, my boy. You never were. Through his tears, Harry nodded. And a thought grew strong in his heart. If Sirius had lived in this world's past, had left this message for him, then perhaps Sirius's bloodline continued here. Maester, Harry said, slowly rising to his feet. The Starks. They descend from Brandon the Builder. Aye, Emmon confirmed. They rule Winterfell, the great house of the north. And though the line is long, their name remains true. Then I must go to them, Harry said, determined now. Even if Sirius is gone, I can protect those who carry his blood. It's what he would have done for me. Emmon nodded, smiling faintly. Harry stood tall. The pain in his chest remained, but it was no longer hollow. It had weight now, purpose. He would go to Winterfell. He would find the Starks. He would honor Sirius's memory, not in mourning, but in action. And so, under the ancient sky of the wall, Harry Potter made a vow: I will protect them. I will stand with them. As long as I draw breath. Chapter 11 The Wolf's Flight. The snow fell silently over Winterfell, its icy flurries clinging to the grey stone walls like a heavy shroud. Inside the ancient halls of the fortress, Lyanna Stark sat by the high, narrow window of her chamber, her fingers cold despite the fire roaring in the hearth. The scent of smoke and pine filled the room, but it brought her no comfort. Her eyes were fixed on the path leading out of the gatehouse, watching for a raven that never came. Days had turned to weeks since the coronation of King Rhaegar Targaryen, and still, no letter. No message, no word. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, not from the cold, but from the hollow ache in her chest. He had promised her songs, freedom, a life beyond the stifling walls of her northern prison. But all she had now were memories and dreams that faded like mist in the morning. Winterfell had once been a place of wild laughter and sibling squabbles, where she could ride her horse across the Godswood trails and spar with the stable boys without shame. But that was before Brandon had returned from the Riverlands with his new bride. Catelyn Tully, Lady Catelyn now, was everything Lyanna was not. Graceful, composed, soft-spoken, she moved like a swan through the great hall, all flowing silks and delicate smiles. And she disapproved of Lyanna from the moment they met. Lyanna still remembered that first week after the wedding. Catelyn had spoken sweetly to Brandon by the hearth, her hands folded primly in her lap, her Tully blue eyes betraying a hint of ambition. Perhaps, my lord, a sept would serve your people well. To honor the seven, and mark your rule with piety. Their father, Lord Rickard, had nearly choked on his ale. This is the north, my lady. We kneel to the old gods beneath the weirwoods. There'll be no southern shrines built here. Catelyn had turned red as the embers in the fireplace. Later, behind closed doors, her fury had risen like a storm tide. She threw a quiet but seething tantrum, demanding Brandon support her. But Brandon, ever the proud wolf, had simply walked away. His heart belonged not to his wife, but to a woman in Barrowton. Everyone knew it, though none dared speak her name aloud. From then on, Catelyn turned her attentions to Lyanna. You shouldn't ride like that, Lyanna. You'll scar your legs. A lady should not brawl with kitchen boys, it is unbecoming. A proper maiden would not speak so openly in court. On and on it went. Her whispers, her glances, her disapproving sighs. It was as though Lyanna's very existence was an affront to Catelyn's sense of decorum. And Lyanna, she had tried. Gods knew she had tried to be civil. But she was not Catelyn. She never would be. Lyanna was a wolf of the north, not a river trout trained to swim in calm waters. She was wild, unpolished, fierce. Now, even the castle felt foreign. The warmth she once felt in the echoing halls of Winterfell had faded into cold stone and longer shadows. She missed Rhaegar. The thought came unbidden, and it twisted something deep inside her. She remembered his voice, low and solemn, his silver hair falling over his violet eyes as he played his harp beneath the great tree at Harrenhal. The way he spoke to her, not as a lord to a lady, but as a man to a woman, with tenderness, curiosity, and depth. He had promised her that there was more to life than duty and expectation. You are not meant to be caged, he had told her once. You were born for greater things than dust and silence. And she had believed him. Every morning since his coronation, she rose early, hoping to see the flutter of wings, the arrival of a raven bearing his seal. And every evening, her heart sank just a little more when the skies remained empty. Would he come for her? Or had he bowed beneath the weight of his crown, abandoning his promises at the altar of duty? Still, she waited, because hope was the only thing she had left. And wolves, after all, were patient hunters. The wind howled low through the stone corridors of Winterfell, tugging at the ancient banners that hung above the great hall. Snow powdered the windowsills, but within the walls, warmth and celebration reigned. Fires crackled, mead flowed, and music echoed from lyres and drums as the people of the north gathered to mark the 16th name-day of Lyanna Stark, daughter of Lord Rickard, sister to Brandon, Eddard, and Benjen, betrothed to the Warden of the Stormlands. But no part of Lyanna's soul stirred with joy. Outside, she wore her best smile, her dark hair braided with winter roses, her pale blue dress chosen by Catelyn Tully to soften her wild edges. She greeted the bannermen, nodded to the lords and ladies, and accepted their gifts with murmured thanks. But inside, her spirit churned like a stormy sea. Every song, every toast, every dance was a drumbeat toward her fate, a fate she had never chosen. This was not just a birthday. This was a herald. Her father, Lord Rickard Stark, had waited precisely for this day, her 16th year, to send the official letter south. A raven had already taken wing to Storm's End, carrying with it a message to Lord Robert Baratheon, confirming the readiness of his bride and the blessings of House Stark. Another letter had flown to the Vale, summoning her brother Eddard from the area and asking Lord Jon Arryn to escort both Ned and Robert north for the long-awaited union. The Tullys of Riverrun, now kin by marriage, had also been invited. A great northern wedding was being prepared, and her father's heart was set on it. It will be under the weirwood, Rickard had said that morning, pride softening the usual stern lines of his face. Not in some southern stone shrine like your brother's. No septons, no seven. The old gods watched over us before the Andals came, and they will watch over you, my daughter, when you speak your vows beneath their white branches. She had said nothing, only nodded. What could she say? She had tried. Gods knew, she had tried everything to prevent this. She had pleaded with her father, citing Robert's reputation. His whores, his drink, the bastard children whispered of in court. She spoke of how he barely knew her beyond her face, her name, her blood. How he loved the idea of her, not the girl herself. How he would ruin her, trap her in a life of waiting while he hunted stags and drank himself into oblivion. But in the halls of power, a man's vices were just that, vices. Not crimes. Lord Rickard had listened with furrowed brow but said only, he is Warden of the Stormlands, Lyanna. A future Lord Paramount, one day, perhaps even Hand of the King. You are a Stark of Winterfell. This is a match worthy of your name. That had been the end of it. She could not speak of Rhaegar. She dared not. How could she tell her father that her heart belonged to the crowned dragon? That her dreams were woven with harp strings and silver hair? That she longed for the day Rhaegar would ride north not as king, but as a man who had promised her freedom? No, that path was closed to her. He was already married. And though Elia of Dorne was distant, though whispers swirled of her frail health and the quiet life she lived in King's Landing, the truth remained, Rhaegar Targaryen had a queen. And Lyanna Stark, wild as she was, could not make herself a usurper to another woman's place. Not yet, not without him standing at her side to face the world. So she wore the crown of northern tradition, furs on her shoulders, braids in her hair, smiles on her lips, and waited. Waited for the letter that never came. Waited for Rhaegar to do something, anything. To send a word, to send a raven, to send her a reason to believe that she was more than a passing dream. But Winterfell was quiet, and the snow kept falling. That night, when the music had faded and the firelight cast flickering shadows on the stone walls, Lyanna sat in her bedchamber alone. Her dress was folded over the chair, her hands bare, her hair undone and tumbling like black silk over her shoulders. She stared into the fire, watching the flames devour the logs like time devoured hope. I'm not meant for cages, she whispered to herself. You said that, Rhaegar. But the only answer was the crackling of the fire, and the cold wind scratching against the windowpane like ghostly fingers. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and the girl known as the Wolf Maid of Winterfell lay down in the dark, her eyes open and full of unanswered prayers. It happened again. As the servants cleared the plates from the morning's meal, Lyanna's face had gone pale, her stomach twisting in a way that could no longer be blamed on rich food or nerves. She had risen from the bench and barely made it out the side door before she doubled over in the snow, retching violently behind the kennels. No one saw her, save for the kitchen boy who quickly looked away, pretending to fuss over the firewood. It had first happened during her birthday feast, an evening of roasted game, honeyed bread, and sweet wine rarely found so far north. They had all dismissed it then. Even she had believed it was the result of indulgence, of a northern stomach not used to southern splendor. But now, it was unmistakable. Her moonblood had not come. Not since before her 16th name day. And Lyanna Stark was no fool. Standing in the cold wind, she pressed a hand over her stomach, trembling. Her body was betraying her secrets, revealing truths no noble maiden could afford to wear. The memory of those fevered nights beneath the stars with Rhaegar, whispers in the dark, fingers intertwined, vows spoken in stolen moments, burned within her like the last embers of a dying fire. She had believed him, believed in him. Now, all she had was this growing panic. And a child. She stumbled back to her room in silence, ignoring the curious looks of passing servants. The walls of Winterfell pressed in around her like the bars of a cage. Her chamber felt colder than it ever had. Rhaegar had promised her the world, had whispered of songs and destinies and kingdoms reborn. But he was gone, crowned, burdened, distant. Had he meant to return? Had she simply been an escape for him, just as he had been for her? She sat on the edge of her bed, staring down at her hands. What now? Could she marry Robert Baratheon and pass the child as his? The thought made her stomach turn more than any spoiled meat. She had fought too hard to expose Robert's philandering ways, his bastards, his lusts, his brash oaths. To turn around and deceive him with another man's child, she couldn't do it. Her honor, wild and stubborn as the rest of her, would not allow it. Then what? She had no choices, no allies. She was a maiden of noble birth, of the most ancient house of the north, and noble women did not bear bastards. It would shame her father, her brothers, Winterfell itself, and Lord Rickard Stark had already endured enough shame with Brandon's southern-style wedding. He had refused to remarry, choosing to raise his children alone. That quiet sacrifice had always been Lyanna's comfort. She could not disgrace him now. There was only one answer. She had to leave. She waited until the moon hung full and silver above the trees. Her plans had been in motion for days, casual questions to the old hunter about provisions, idle chats with stable hands about the best forest paths. No one suspected anything. She'd gathered her meager savings, 28 gold dragons and 8 silver stars. She packed lightly but carefully, smoked jerky, 2 cloaks, a fire starter, bedroll, waterskin. Everything tucked neatly into saddlebags hidden by the stable's rear fence. In the deepest hush of the night, Lyanna walked barefoot down the silent corridors of Winterfell. The stone was cold beneath her feet, the walls whispering old stories as she passed. She stopped at her father's chamber, the heavy oak door slightly ajar. The room inside was dark, save for the dull glow of dying embers in the hearth. Her father slept soundly, his thick gray beard rising and falling with his breath. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words cracking from her throat. "I never wanted to do this. But I can't stay. I can't let you bear the shame of what I've done." She stood there for a long moment, watching him sleep, this stern, weathered man who had never once failed her, who had ruled his house with honor and steel. She wanted to reach for him, to kiss his brow, but her hand would not rise. She backed away before her courage failed, returning to her room only to scrawl a letter in trembling ink. "Father, I have run away with the one I love. I met him at the tourney of Harrenhal. Do not search for me. I am going south to be with him, and I beg you, please, forgive me." It was a lie, but a lie to buy her time. She folded the parchment, sealed it, and left it on her pillow. Then she crept from her room for the final time, a shadow among the sleeping halls of her childhood. Through the crypts she went, down into the heart of Winterfell, where a hidden tunnel that led out to the forests beyond Winter Town. The night was cold, the trees skeletal and swaying in the wind, but her path was clear. At the mouth of the tunnel, her horse waited, saddlebags packed and tied, reins looped over a low branch. The old hunter's advice had served her well. She mounted quickly, pulling her cloak tight. The cold bit at her face as she turned the horse toward the narrow trail. Behind her, the great castle loomed, its towers silver in the moonlight, its gates closed, its people asleep. Lyanna Stark looked back only once. A tear slipped down her cheek, freezing on her skin. Then she kicked the horse forward, riding into the darkness of the trees, away from home, from duty, from everything she had ever known. Toward a future she no longer dared to dream. Chapter 12 Steel and Snow. The northern wind was biting cold that morning, but Harry didn't mind. He had grown accustomed to the chill, wrapped in his enchanted cloak, his gloved hands loosely gripping the reins of his horse as they trotted along the damp path veering off the Kingsroad. The snow had long melted at lower elevations, giving way to stretches of misty hills and pine-covered ridges. Every so often, he glanced up into the sky, where a pale white shape circled lazily above the clouds, his dragon, Winter, gliding with effortless grace. It had been nearly 2 months since he had last seen Doran and Oliver. He realized he owed them more than just silence. They had taken him in when he had nothing, strangers who had treated him like kin. And he hadn't even left a proper farewell. "The Starks can wait," Harry muttered under his breath, guiding the horse off the main road. "I've got time." The ride took most of the day. By late afternoon, familiar signs appeared: the forked tree with the iron nail embedded in its trunk, the moss-covered stones leading to Doran's cottage. But what Harry saw next brought him to a halt. The cottage had changed. The old thatched roof, once sagging and patched with tar, was now fully rethatched and neatly braced with new timbers. A fresh layer of whitewash brightened the cottage walls. There was a carved wooden eagle perched on the doorframe, and 2 flowerbeds lined the path leading to the porch. As Harry dismounted and walked toward the home, the front door burst open. "Lord Gryffindor!" cried a voice. 2 girls ran toward him, laughing and beaming. It was Elsa and Nina, Doran's daughters, only now they looked very different. Elsa, tall and graceful for her age, wore a deep blue woolen dress trimmed with silver thread, her long dark hair braided with red ribbons. Little Nina, perhaps even more cuter now, wore a fur-lined green cloak and clutched a carved wooden fox in her hands. "Lord Gryffindor, you're back," Elsa squealed, grabbing his arm. "I missed you," Nina added, hugging his waist tightly. Harry smiled, genuinely touched. "It's good to see you both. You've grown." Elsa stepped back, eyes wide. "Did you come for the wedding?" Harry blinked. "Wedding? Whose wedding?" "Uncle Oliver's. He's marrying Beth tomorrow," she announced proudly, like it was a royal event. "Beth from the market?" Harry asked, his smile widening. Elsa nodded rapidly. "Yes, she's going to be our aunt." "Well," Harry chuckled, "I suppose I arrived just in time." The door to the cottage opened again and Doran stepped out, beaming from ear to ear. He looked younger than Harry remembered, clean-shaven, his salt and pepper hair tied back neatly, and his tunic freshly laundered. "Well, well," Doran said, striding forward and clasping Harry's forearm. "I told Beth he'd show up, didn't I, girls?" "You did," Elsa said, giggling. Doran's voice was warm. "Come inside, milord, come in. My wife just baked honey oat bread." "I'll come by," Harry said, "but first I want to see Oliver." "He's at the mill, still pretending he can fix things without breaking them," Doran said with a grin. "It's just down the path, you remember it?" "I remember." The girls clung to his arms as he walked, asking questions all at once. "Did you go to White Harbor? Did you see a bear? Did you meet the Starks?" Harry laughed as he gently pried them off. "One at a time, I'll tell you everything at the wedding feast, all right?" They agreed, reluctantly, and ran off to help their mother. The mill hadn't changed as much as the cottage, but even here there were signs of improvement: new tools stacked neatly on the side, a reinforced wooden awning over the door, and a sturdy new wheel turning slowly in the stream's current. Harry pushed the door open. Inside, the scent of sawdust and oil filled the air. Oliver stood by a large wooden table, hammer in hand, muttering curses at a plank that wouldn't settle flush. "You're holding the chisel upside down," Harry said from the doorway. Oliver froze. Then he turned, slowly, and a smile broke across his face. "Lord Gryffindor," he laughed, walking over and wrapping Harry in a one-armed hug. "Where in the hells have you been?" Harry returned the hug, grinning. "Around. I heard someone's getting married." "Damn right I am. Beth finally said yes after I got the roof fixed." He leaned back. "Though I think it was the silver necklace you gave me that did most of the convincing." Harry raised a brow. "So I'm the reason for this wedding?" Oliver laughed. "Let's just say your generosity put a few stars in her eyes." "You staying long?" "I'll stay for the wedding, of course. Then I've got a trip to Winterfell." Oliver frowned. "You sure you want to get involved with the northern politics?" "I've got my reasons." Oliver nodded. "Well, you've got a place here if you ever need it." "I know." That night, Harry stayed at the mill with Oliver. They talked well past midnight, sharing stories by firelight. When the hour grew late and Oliver finally fell asleep in his chair, Harry stepped outside. Above, the stars glittered like frost scattered across the heavens. And there, like a ghost among clouds, soared Winter, his white scales reflecting moonlight. Harry gave a soft whistle. The dragon answered with a deep-throated rumble from above before spiraling higher into the night sky. Smiling, Harry looked toward the distant silhouette of Winterfell. Soon, he thought, but for now, let's enjoy the calm. Smoke curled lazily from the chimneys, and laughter still echoed from the celebration that had rocked the little village all afternoon. The wedding had been a marvel unlike any the small folk had ever witnessed. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted boar, honeyed trout, venison pies, and fresh breads. There were platters of wild berries soaked in cream, jugs of spiced ale, and rare wines flowing like rivers, all of it made possible by the quiet generosity of one man. Harry had discreetly handed Doran a pouch earlier that morning, 20 more gold dragons, enough to feed the whole countryside and then some. It's for Oliver, he had said with a smile. Let him start married life with something worth remembering. And remembered it would be. The wedding had taken place before the Godswood tree, an ancient weirwood nestled just beyond the pasture, its white bark gnarled with age, crimson leaves fluttering like bloodied silk in the breeze. It was a sacred spot, and the villagers had decorated it with garlands of mountain heather and bluebells. Beth had worn a crown of flowers, and Oliver stood proud in his best tunic, embroidered for the occasion with tiny gold thread around the cuffs, a gift from Doran's wife. When they kissed beneath the weirwood, the crowd cheered loud enough to wake the hills. That evening, the mill had become a hall of merriment. Lanterns swung from the rafters, casting golden light across flushed faces and swaying bodies. The wine Harry provided seemed enchanted, it never ran out, no matter how many jugs were poured. Villagers drank and danced until their legs gave out, and eventually one by one, the guests staggered home with full bellies and slurred blessings for the newlyweds. Now, the moon had risen high, silvering the quiet world. The noise had died down. The guests had departed, and Oliver and Beth were given privacy at last, their laughter now a gentle murmur behind closed shutters. Inside Doran's cottage, the hearth crackled softly. Harry sat in a simple wooden chair, stretching his legs near the fire, a half-empty cup of mulled wine resting in his hand. That was a good day, Doran said, slumping into the chair across from him with a tired sigh. We'll be talking about it for generations. You deserve it, Harry said with a smile. So does Oliver. He's a good man. Doran chuckled. He's a stubborn ass, but a good one. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind only shared by men who had earned their rest. Then, Harry's ears perked. A distant clop-clop broke the stillness. Hooves. Multiple riders. Coming fast. Doran heard it too. He straightened in his chair. Who in the hells would be riding this way at this hour? Harry rose to his feet and moved toward the window, brushing aside the curtain. The road leading down to the mill was lit by moonlight, and he could see them, 6 riders in dark cloaks, hoods up, swords on their hips. They weren't moving like farmers or kinfolk. Their posture was too upright, their pace too steady. Trouble. I'll take a look, Harry said, setting down his wine. You stay inside. Doran didn't argue. Be careful. Harry stepped out into the night, drawing his sword of Gryffindor from his belt. He walked down the gravel path, silent as a shadow, his boots making no sound as he passed between the trees toward the mill. The cold wind had picked up as Harry moved toward the mill, the moon high and pale behind shrouds of clouds. From the shadows, he had seen the riders dismount, Bolton men, armored and armed, their cloaks bearing the flayed man of the Dreadfort. But it wasn't just soldiers. There was another among them, robed in gray, tall, thin, with skin as pale as frost and eyes that held the chill of death itself. Roose Bolton. Harry stayed hidden, crouched behind a low wall of stone and moss, while the Lord of the Dreadfort stepped forward and banged his gauntlet against the mill door. When Oliver opened it, rubbing sleep from his eyes, Harry saw the moment fear overtook him. You didn't ask for my permission, Roose Bolton said, voice quiet but cruel. You are my tenant, Oliver. You live on my land. And yet you wed a woman, extravagantly, no less, without even sending an invitation to your liege lord. Oliver swallowed hard and bowed his head. My lord, I didn't mean disrespect. It was. Quiet, Roose hissed. You weren't invited to think. You're a miller, not a knight. And I was not invited. Nor was I asked. That alone is offense. But then I hear rumors. He stepped forward, his lips curling into a mockery of a smile. Rumors that your bride is a beauty. Harry's fingers curled into fists as he watched Oliver step protectively in front of the door. Bolton's smile grew colder. Did you forget our customs, boy? In these lands, a lord is entitled to the first taste of the harvest. Be it grain, meat, or women. He looked toward the mill, where Beth no doubt listened in terror from within. And I intend to collect what is mine. No, please, she's my wife, Oliver stammered. She's my subject, Roose replied. Then, with a sharp gesture, he ordered his men. Drag him out. The soldiers grabbed Oliver by the arms and yanked him into the snow. He fell to his knees, struggling. Beth cried out from within the mill, but another soldier barred the door with his spear. Roose adjusted his gloves slowly. I'll be brief, he muttered. A quick visit. I'm sure the girl will learn to enjoy. That's enough. The voice cut through the cold like steel. Every head turned. Harry stepped out from the shadows, cloak billowing behind him, the sword of Gryffindor gleaming silver under the moonlight. He walked with calm authority, eyes fixed on Roose Bolton. One of the Bolton men stepped forward, hand on his sword. Who in the seven hells are you? Harry stopped a few paces away, sword resting at his side but ready. I'm the man who's not going to let you touch that woman. Bolton raised an eyebrow. You interfere with the affairs of House Bolton. I interfere with rape, Harry said evenly, no matter who tries to justify it. From the ground, Oliver shouted, Lord Gryffindor, run. Please, you can't fight them all. Roose Bolton narrowed his eyes. So you're the so-called Lord Gryffindor. The Ghost Lord of White Harbor. HMPH. I've studied the Lords of Westeros since I was a boy. There's no Gryffindor in the north. Not in the Reach, nor Dorne, nor beyond the Vale. Certainly none in the south. He circled slowly, appraising Harry. In your name, it reeks of invention. Gryffindor, a child's tale, a made-up name meant to impress simple folk. Harry said nothing, letting Bolton talk. You think you can flaunt wealth and titles without consequence? That you can hand out gold to peasants and dance through the north like you are a king? Roose's mouth twisted. I know what you are. A fraud, a pretender, and now, a dead man. With a flick of his fingers, he gave the order. Kill him. The Bolton men advanced, 4 of them in full armor, swords drawn, their boots crunching through the frostbitten grass. Harry didn't move. He held the sword low, tip resting in the snow, his breath misting in the cold. He let them come closer. 10 paces. 8. Then he gripped the hilt with both hands and stepped forward. To be continued,